Chapter 1507. 2 Consecutive Losses. The Great Ling Forbidden Land. Never heard of it. Was there such a forbidden land? Wuxia and his group were all looking at each other and shaking their heads, expressing that they had never heard of such a place. Humph, how could a country bumpkin like you possibly come from a forbidden land? Hu Bing humphed. What person that came from a forbidden land would be so ignorant of the ways of the world, and let go of the big prize while grabbing at trifles like the steps? Weren't you embarrassed? Ling Han's mindset was different though. This whole treasure trove was his, so wherever he started from, who in this world could interfere? You guys haven't even heard of the Great Ling Forbidden Land. You all are really too crude. Ling Han retorted sarcastically. How could the tongue that he had trained in his encounters with a large black dog not be sharp? Hiss this guy! Wuxia and his group were exploding with fury. There was obviously no such forbidden land, and he had to be an imposter, yet he actually called them crude. Don't bicker with him endlessly, Wuxia said sinisterly. All right. Hu Bing nodded. His eyes turned on Ling Han, while a cold smirk was upon his lips. He might not be good at blurting out nonsense, but he was truly skilled. No matter how much you were bragging, could that actually become reality? He moved and shot out a fist at Ling Han. Origin power condensed, forming a fist of rock, but the might behind this attack was pitifully small. At most, it was only at the level of the low extreme of the Eternal River tier. Why was it so weak? Very simple. The mountain winds here were filled with frightening destructive power, and one had to use origin power to protect oneself, or his body would be torn into pieces. This was a kind of power of regulation. Thus, the stronger the person, the stronger its effects would be. It was clear that the gap between the cultivation levels of the 7 of them were huge, but they all had to use their full efforts to deal with it. But if I was weak, so would be my enemy. Thus, he was sure that even if his attack was only at the level of the low extreme, he would be able to cause a serious wound to Ling Han, or even kill him. He was only in the low extreme as well. Furthermore, an ordinary Eternal River tier would possess only 2 to 3 stars of tier surpassing battle prowess, at most, and now with that being hindered as well, how would Ling Han be capable of blocking his attack? Wuxia and the others crossed their arms over their chests as they watched, appearing very arrogant. They were all king tiers that had come from a forbidden land. Asti from young prodigies that had similarly come from a forbidden land. Who would be able to match them in this world? None. Definitely none. Ling Han very casually gave him a look. He tapped out a finger, and then began to dig at the steps again. He was a very busy person. Hu Bing's hair was almost standing on ends in his fury. That was really too arrogant. We are fighting here, and you are actually still digging. Will you die if you dig a little less? Since that is the case, then just go ahead and die. He controlled the stone fist to head in Ling Han's direction. The tap of Ling Han's finger turned into a flash of sword chi that slashed the stone fist. Suddenly, sword light sank in, and this stone fist was actually sliced apart by force. Immediately, it changed the direction of attack, and the 2 halves passed by either side of Ling Han, not causing the slightest bit of damage. But this flash of sword chi was still slicing towards Hu Bing as if its might had not been weakened in the slightest. Hu Bing was shocked. Under ordinary circumstances, he naturally would not be afraid of any attack coming from the low extreme of the Eternal River tier, but the problem was he was currently expending the majority of his origin power on defending against the mountain winds. And previously, he had used what origin power he had left in his attack, so there was no other origin power he had left to strengthen his defense. Though this attack was not too strong, it just happened to be the last straw to break the camel's back. Hu Bing! A woman moved, and stretched out a palm that turned into a hand that seemed to be made out of a jade, forming a block in front of Hu Bing. Hu Bing was incredibly grateful. Thank you, Sister Jing. However, he had not even finished his thanks when the sword chi had reached him. That jade palm shattered instantly, and the chi continued to slash towards Hu Bing. Pooh! He had not expected this attack at all. At first, he had thought that since Hu Jing had made her move, it would definitely be enough to help him out, but now he could only watch helplessly as the attack reached him and slashed into his chest. A streak of blood immediately spurted out, and he was sent flying with a force. Brother Bing! The other 6 called out at the same time. They all raced out, and managed to catch Hu Bing. I'm fine, Hu Bing said with difficulty. Though this attack from Ling Han was very powerful, after being blocked 2 consecutive times, its might had also considerably lessened, so it was natural that it could not possibly deal too much damage to him. More importantly, it was because the mountain winds here were too powerful. Otherwise, he would not fear this attack. Hu Can and the others all bore livid expressions. They had initially thought they would be able to easily suppress this country bumpkin, but in the end, it was Hu Bing who was wounded by his attack instead. This made them feel very shocked and also embarrassed. Strange, it was obvious that all of them were affected by the mountain winds, and none of them could release their strongest battle prowess. He was only in the low extreme, so how could he be this powerful? Could it be that he had really come from that whatever great Ling forbidden land? If not, what other place could possibly produce such a powerful prodigy? We have underestimated you. The one who had moved to help Hu Bing out of his dilemma, Hu Jing, stepped out. There was a hint of anger on her beautiful face. She had already moved, and yet was still unable to fully protect Hu Bing, which angered her. Ling Han ignored her, and continued digging out the steps. Just how much was he looking down on her? At this instant, Hu Jing really felt an impulse to commit murder. Yet Empress Luan Xing stepped out, and said, "My husband does not have the time to deal with you. Let me exchange a few blows with you." Hu Jing's eyes were sinister. She had resented Empress Luan Xing for snatching her spotlight in the first place, and now added with the ire she felt from Ling Han, this was a good opportunity to vent her anger on this woman. She would not kill her. Instead, she wanted to leave behind a few large scars that could not be removed on her face so that she would eternally become a hideous hag. And then we'll see if you still dare to show off your beauty. She moved directly. With a soft exclamation, the mountain boomed repeatedly. Innumerably stone spikes shot up from underground, and stabbed towards Empress Luan Xing like they were multiple spears. The Empress was not Ling Han. She did not have an astonishing physique. In this place she, too, would be greatly hindered, but she still had a slab of the absolute beginning stone. This was a god tool that could disperse all attacks. She shot out. Pang 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 pang. The bricks slammed down on them, and everything was shattered. A great beauty was actually waving around a brick. This was definitely inappropriate, but the Empress's beauty surpassed all else. Even if she was waving a brick, she was still exceedingly beautiful, presenting a pleasing sight to all. She reached her directly, and slammed down the brick on Hu Jing's face. Under the effects of the mountain winds, how could Hu Jing block this blow? She was sent flying, collapsing on the ground. This time, her injuries were far more serious than Hu Bing's. She was helped to her feet by the others. The words Ancestor Wenxin were shockingly printed on her face, making for a humorous sight, but Hu Can and the others did not feel like laughing at all. They stared at the brick in the Empress's hand and frowned. Absolute beginning stone? Hu Can said in a low voice. The Empress ignored his question. She was not duty-bound to answer to anyone. That was how proud she was. It must be the absolute beginning stone. It cannot be damaged by external power, and has ancestral words etched on it as well. It must be the absolute beginning stone, a woman said with absolute confidence. Her name was Hu Shuyu, and she was in the early stage of the consummate level. Snatch it. The eyes of the others all lit up. Don't think that the absolute beginning stone did not have much power. Because of its unique trait of not breaking down, it would sometimes be used to record some secrets, and it could be passed on through the generations. Thus, it was possible that there was an astonishing secret technique hidden in an absolute beginning stone. Worst came to worst, even if there was none, absolute beginning stone was too extraordinary in the immortal realm, and could be used as a precious treasure for defense. Chapter 1508 Origins of the Forbidden Lands. But the problem was that the mountain winds here were too bitingly cold, and greatly restricted their cultivation levels. In that way, the Empress, who had hold of the absolute beginning stone, was too mighty. How were they supposed to defeat her? It was not that they were not strong. The truth was the conditions here were too much in favor of the Empress. Let's go. We'll go somewhere else first. Once they descend the mountain, we will apprehend them. Hu Can promptly decided. Even if he was in the peak stage of the consummate level, he was not confident that he could apprehend Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing here. Especially Ling Han. It was really too strange. It was like he was completely unaffected by the mountain winds. Hey, why are you leaving? Ling Han stood up. We were just having a fun conversation, so how could you leave without saying goodbye? Who was having a fun conversation with you? Do we know each other very well? Hukan shook his head. Ignore him. Retreat. There was no need to get momentary satisfaction. Fighting in this place was much too disadvantageous for them. The 7 of them wanted to leave, yet Ling Han blocked their path of retreat with a single leap, not allowing them to descend the mountain. When they saw Ling Han fly over their heads, the 7 of them could not help but pale. Are you a freak? The mountain winds here possessed frightening destructive power. They didn't even dare to walk too fast. Otherwise, when the winds tore at them, they would be wounded all over, and there was even a chance to be directly killed on the spot. This was also why Hu Bing and Hu Jing had been hit previously, because they dared not dodge. But Ling Han actually managed to leap over their heads. The winds were not just stronger at a higher altitude, but the speed of this leap was also fast. Yet Ling Han was standing there completely unharmed. There was not even a single scratch on him. This caused their hair to stand on ends. Just what technique had this guy cultivated to have such frightening defenses? Could it be that he really was a freak from some forbidden land? They were initially absolutely sure that there was no Great Ling forbidden land, but now, their conviction couldn't help but waver. After all, there was still quite a large number of forbidden lands, and it was normal if they had not heard of 1 or 2 among them. Perhaps the others just liked to keep a low profile. Ling Han smiled. All of us are siblings from forbidden lands. Come, let's sit down and have a nice chat. Hu Kan and his group were all shaking their heads internally. They really wanted to throw curses back at Ling Han, but with their identity and status, they naturally disdained to say such crude words. Hu Kan was the leader of their group after all, so he spoke up. Since we are all brothers from forbidden lands, we can have a chat at any time, right? Why don't you come and visit our 8 stones forbidden land later? Do you dare accept? Once you have come, don't even think of leaving. Even if you have a massive secret, you will have to obediently hand it over. All right, I will pay a visit to your place later. However, I am not familiar with the 8 stones forbidden land. Why don't you introduce it to me first? Ling Han said with a smile. To speak frankly, he wanted to know of the origins of the 8 stones forbidden land. These 7 people were very strong and very condescending. Without powerful abilities, this was definitely the behavior of an idiot. However, all 7 of them were in the Eternal River tier, so they weren't idiots, but rather had a very strong background. Hukan strove in the opposite direction and said, I have not heard of the Great Ling forbidden land either. Why don't you talk about it to us, brother? Both sides were smiling cheerfully at each other, looking to be completely on good terms. A thought appeared in Ling Han's head, and he asked, It can't be that the 8 stones forbidden land were among those who attacked the Heavenly River King together, right? Otherwise, how could it be possible that these people had so, coincidentally, appeared? This was really a lucky stroke. He had guessed correctly, but the process was completely wrong. But it was fine, as long as the result was correct. The expressions of Hu Kan and his group shifted slightly. The secret treasure of the Heavenly River King was too important. They felt regret now. In truth, they should have sent one of their number back to make a report, but according to the circumstances then, who would be willing to return? The first to enter into the mystery realm would definitely obtain the largest gains. There was no need for the 7 of them to admit it. Ling Han knew just by looking at their expressions. Though the 7 of them had strong abilities, it was obvious that they had not traveled for too long in the outside world. They were not very subtle, and all their thoughts were written on their faces. He pondered internally. At the time, the Heavenly River King had been on the end of the combined attacks of a great many elites, and there were also the bodies of 3 Phoenix Kings outside. Then, those who had attacked the Heavenly River King together would definitely have to be mighty figures of Saint King level. They had already reached that height. What else could they possibly want? To enter into the celestial realm, and achieve true immortality. But how was it possible that those from the immortal realm knew of the existence of the celestial realm? Just like how the Star Sand Saint, the notionless saint also thought that the apex of martial arts world was the Saint King, and neither could avoid the most fundamental regulation of the heaven and earth life, aging, illness, and death. Thus, there was only one possibility. Ling Han nodded and asked, "You have all been exiled from the celestial realm." When these words were spoken, Hu Can and his group immediately became stirred up. Nonsense, how could we have possibly been exiled? It was a few forces of the celestial realm that rose up in rebellion, and we were only forced to leave the celestial realm because we lost the war. We will definitely return to the celestial realm and take back all that is rightfully ours. These people exclaimed with bloodshot eyes. It was obvious that this idea was regularly instilled into them. That was why they would become so hot-blooded and rash upon a single mention of it. Ling Han chuckled and said, "Don't be stirred up. Speak calmly." "Humph, though you have wormed facts out of us, this is not the slightest bit advantageous to you." Hu Can looked coldly at Ling Han. "Since you know of the celestial realm, you should also be a victim of that massive wipeout long ago." At this moment, he truly believed that Ling Han was from that whatever great Ling forbidden land. Otherwise, no one aside from those from a forbidden land would know of the existence of the celestial realm, especially when he also mentioned the great turmoil that happened then. Ling Han really wanted to introduce Gu Daoyi to them. He was one who had directly come from the celestial realm. These people would have to address him as ancestor, right? Then with him and Gu Daoyi being fellow sect disciple brothers in name, these people should also address him as ancestor. He thought that, and a strange smile involuntarily appeared on his face, causing Hu Can and his group to feel creeped out. They felt a coldness rise up in their bodies despite themselves. Ling Han coughed and said, "How many Saint Kings are there in your 8 stones forbidden land?" He was very curious about the strength of a forbidden land. There had been innumerable people who had been cast out of the celestial realm. Some were exiled with their entire tribe, and it was possible that this was what led to the formation of the present forbidden lands because they possessed a complete martial arts inheritance. But some had their entire tribe wiped out, and only 1 or 2 tribesmen managed to escape to the immortal realm, and that was the origin of the ancient divine tribes. An example was Empress Luan Xing, who could only rely on her bloodline inheritance. Naturally, she was weaker. Hu Can and his group all looked livid. Previously, they had wanted to keep Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing under house arrest, but in the blink of an eye, their positions had actually exchanged completely. How could they endure that? "You want to keep us captive?" Hu Jing questioned harshly. "Ho ho, why do you have to put it so negatively?" Ling Han shook his head and smiled. "However, if you must think of it that way, it can also be understood like that." Hu Can's expression turned to ice and he declared, "Then we can only settle this with a battle." Chapter 1509 Gathering Saintly Material. Ling Han smiled and said, "If it's a fight you want, it's a fight you'll get." In these conditions, he was really unafraid of anyone in the consummate level of the Eternal River tier. Even if someone in the pinnacle level came, he could still manage to put up a fight. Hu Can took a deep breath. "Sir, you are underestimating us too much. Do you really think that just because the conditions here are disadvantageous to us, we are completely helpless? Humph, we are merely unwilling to pay that certain price. However, if you are so determined to provoke us, then we'll just let you suffer the consequences of your own actions." He channeled a secret technique, and suddenly his muscles bulged up one after another. His clothes ripped and revealed a body that was completely made out of rock. His figure had also enlarged by a whole 3 to 4 times. Though it was completely bare, a creature that looked like a stone statue would not be too embarrassing to look at. Brotherkin has cultivated the 8 stones technique to the 2nd level, and the moment he channels it, his physique is invincible," a woman said, her voice filled with envy. This was the strongest secret technique of the 8 stones tribe, and was also their foundation. Though every person could be taught it, they normally only learnt the 1st level. The requirements for the 2nd level of the technique were too high. There were not many that had successfully cultivated it in the whole 8 stones forbidden land. Hu Can was one of them, and thus he truly had a right to be arrogant. When this secret technique was in use, the threat the mountain winds posed to him was immediately greatly reduced, allowing him to be able to draw more of his strength to be used in attack. However, using this secret technique itself would require expending a little origin power, and added with the fact that the threat of the mountain winds had not been erased, he could use half of his true abilities at most. In his eyes, would half of his true abilities still be not enough? "You're going down." Hu Can moved, his figure shooting out towards Ling Han, charging forwards like a wild bull. 8 stones body art, a secret technique of the celestial realm. Ling Han was unafraid. He actually dared compete in physique with him? Just how depressed did he want to make himself? He lifted a foot and dashed, crashing towards Wuxian. "You're looking for death." Wuxian humphed coldly. He did not mind killing Ling Han. In any case, it was enough to leave only one alive to be interrogated later. Furthermore, Ling Han was no beauty, so what need was there for him to be merciful? He shot out a fist, and multiple stone spikes appeared from his fist. They were incredibly sharp and stabbed towards Ling Han's head. In this one attack, your form and spirit would be destroyed. Ling Han also shot out a fist, but there was sword intent entwined around it. A blood crow flew out. If anyone from the 8th campus was here, they would definitely exclaim in surprise. That was because this blood crow was a few hundred times larger than the usual that was summoned from a normal blood crow formation. And you called that a blood CRW? It was obviously a giant blood-colored beast. The blood crow flapped its wings, and greeted Wuxian's fist. As its wings flapped, multiple flashes of sword chi shot out, with the power of time entwined within. 10 formations joined as one, fused with the tide of the ages, and sent out with a lightning sword technique. Abruptly, Wuxian paled. He already felt fear before this attack even reached him. More importantly, he was unable to use his full abilities at this time. Boom! The blood crow reached him, and Wuxian's fist immediately crumbled as endless sword chi swept over him. Ah! Wuxian humphed lowly, and retreated continuously. "I've still got a lot of questions to ask you guys." "In your dreams." Wuxian smirked coldly. Ling Han was shocked. "You guys want to generously venture to your death?" "Who said that?" Wuxian drew out a talisman. Ling Han's expression suddenly became serious. If this was the decree of a saint, the present him was not yet qualified to oppose it. "Let's go." Wuxian tore the talisman, and a brilliant light swept over them. Suddenly, the 7 of them had vanished without a trace. So it turned out to be a teleportation talisman. Ling Han saw that they did not teleport too far away. They had only arrived at the foot of the mountain. Because this was a small dimension, and the grade of the teleportation talisman was not as high as the regulations of this place, even if they have teleported, they had not left. They had merely left this peak. However, there was no such frightening winds at the foot of the mountain. "Brat, do you dare come down and fight us?" they called out in challenge. There were 7 of them in all, and all of their cultivation levels were above those of Ling Han and his companion, and yet they actually had to flee from them. This was too embarrassing. If this was a battle at the foot of the mountain, they would be completely unafraid. "If you can, come up here." Ling Han continued digging out the steps. He couldn't care less about them. The 7 of them exploded in fury. This country bumpkin was really despicable. "Let's go to the other peaks and check them out first." They did not dare go to that mountain peak where Ling Han was anymore. "Should we send someone back to make a report?" Hu Jing asked with some hesitation. "Whom should we send?" Wuxian glared. "By now, none of us would be willing to leave, right? Moreover, a trip back and forth would take 3 to 4 years' time at least, and by then, would there still be anything of value left behind?" The remaining 6 all remained silent. In any case, none of them were willing to leave. This was the treasure of the Heavenly River King, and it was said that it was connected with the celestial realm. "Come, let's go to the other peaks." In the end, none of them left. Instead, they headed to the mountain peak next to this one. Ling Han did not bother with them. He was happily storing away this godly metal, and progressing slowly upwards. As long as these 7 people had not left this place, he was in no rush. A day later, the 2 of them finally arrived at the summit. Now that they were here, the aura exuding from that paw was even more frightening, causing Ling Han's and Empress Luan Xing's heart to beat wildly. There was a chance that their hearts could explode at any time. "Do you want to take some temporary shelter?" Ling Han asked the Empress. "I can still hold on now. When I can't, I will tell you," the Empress said gently. Ling Han nodded, and surveyed the place. The palace that had been blasted by this massive paw had once been incredibly grand, and that could still be distinguished even now. Every brick and tile was extraordinary, and there were still slivers of divine brilliance entwined around them. However, being stepped on by that paw, the divine essence within had been completely destroyed. There were few bricks and tiles that were still unscathed. This is green origin jade. Ling Han recognized this material and couldn't help but be shocked. This was saintly material. According to legends, as long as it had reached the size of a fist, it was possible that it would gain consciousness and a new life would be nurtured from it. And if saintly material had their own consciousness, what kind of concept was that? That they could become saints in future. Just like the Stone Emperor's old man. Yet the green origin jade in front of them was the main material for constructing the palace. This was far more than the size of a fist. This was practically a small mountain's worth. Ling Han felt an urge to complain. Though the green origin jade was merely level 17, and belonged to the lowest grade of saintly material, just how wasteful was it to use it to build the walls of a palace? No wonder even those tribes exiled from the celestial realm coveted the heavenly river king, and did not even hesitate to join forces together to attack him. This was indeed enough to draw the envy of others. Unfortunately, the majority of the green origin jade had been damaged by this paw, and all their divinity had been erased. They had become mere scraps, and this made Ling Han want to beat his chest and stamp his feet in anger. All of this was his. Whom did this damn paw belong to? In future, he would definitely seek the owner out for a reckoning. Ling Han picked through the rubble, and stored the remaining green origin jade into the black tower. As he rummaged, his heart continued to ache. If anyone saw this, they would definitely be extremely curious. You were gathering saintly material, yet why did you look like you were about to go and pick a fight? Chapter 15:10 Treasure Trove. The majority of the palace had already been destroyed. Even if there were a considerable number of rooms that had not suffered the direct hit of the massive claw, they had still suffered serious damage. One could imagine what kind of terrifying shock wave had been generated when this paw had landed. Even a palace built of saintly material could not withstand it, and had been shattered into ruins by the force. This should have been the move of a saint king. That was the only way that a mere shock wave could damage saintly material, the lowest grade of saintly material. As Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing circled around the palace, they continued to gather pieces of green origin jade. Whether intact or damaged, they just store them away first, and then could slowly pick through them later. Ling Han was like a swarm of locusts sweeping through, leaving nothing behind wherever he passed. The Empress hid her smile behind a hand, feeling that this was amusing. They had soon finished clearing the last area in the farthest outskirts, and were advancing inwards. They saw that this giant paw had slammed into the palace and shattered the ground, and an underground space was revealed. Ling Han and the Empress glanced at each other and simultaneously exclaimed, "Treasure trove!" There was another space beneath the palace. What else could it be but a treasure trove? Initially, it should be that it could only be opened when one found the right mechanism, but the owner of the massive paw was too strong. With a single strike, he had damaged the walls of this treasure trove. His power had reached the level of destroying saintly material. The tips of the claws had penetrated into the ground, but because these claws were too big, even if they pierced only holes, they were big enough to allow one person to enter. However, even if a tiger had died, its might was still present. This paw was still exuding a powerful aura, and the closer one approached, the stronger the feeling of suffocation. Even the Empress could not stand against it. If she tried to forcefully approach, her delicate figure would be shattered by the force. Ling Han was still fine. His physique was too strong, and had far surpassed his actual cultivation level. This kind of pressure from a mere aura was also based on regulations, and merely targeted one's cultivation level instead of being absolute. Hence, Ling Han was even more relaxed than a saint. He drew the Empress into the Black Tower first, and then slowly approached again. Now that he had reached this place, even he dared not walk too fast. He could clearly see that the regulations had solidified in the area surrounding the giant claw, and formed multiple blades of gold that were floating in the air. Stimulated by the ripple of air caused by his entry, these golden blades floated towards him. They merely trembled, and even the air itself was cut open, revealing multiple tears. Ling Han involuntarily paled. This was not just power of regulation, but rather the non-dispersible willpower of a saint king. If he suffered a single strike, it was guaranteed that he would be torn to pieces even with his physique. After all, His absolute physique was only equivalent to being close to level 15 godly metal. He would not be able to withstand them at all. The golden blades floated over at a very slow pace, but the might would not decrease just because their speed was slow. They still possessed the destructive power that was enough to destroy a small saint or even a medium saint. In the instant that the golden blades came close, Ling Han entered into the Black Tower. The golden blades swept past like soft ripples on the surface of a lake, and the ripples slowly smoothed out. When peace had returned, only then did Ling Han exit the Black Tower and continue onwards. He had to enter into the Black Tower with every step he took. It was clear that he was merely about 100 steps away from the underground treasure trove. Under normal circumstances, he could cover that distance with a single leap, but now he took half a day's time to breach this distance. He had finally arrived. Ling Han looked at that giant paw that was just before his eyes. The metallic outer skin was exuding a cold aura, just like the oldest god in the universe. It was obviously incredibly hideous, yet had a kind of sacred aura that filled one with reverence. Too bad he couldn't store this thing away. Otherwise, if he managed to extract even a single drop of blood essence, that would still be a precious treasure without equal. Ling Han shook his head. If he used divine sense to wrap around this massive claw, it would definitely be shattered at the very first moment and damage his spirit. Even if he did not become an empty shell, his essence would still be injured, and he would not even have to think about advancing further in future. He couldn't help but feel suspicious. This paw so coincidentally just happened to press down on top of the treasure trove. Could it be that its owner had long since been aware that there was something good hidden underneath? If this chariot had been drawn through the universe by 3 living Phoenix Kings all those years ago, then even if he similarly was a Saint King, how could he have managed to catch up? He must have known the course these 3 Phoenix Kings would travel on, and then set up an ambush in advance. Could it be that a spy had appeared among those close to the Heavenly River King? This also well corresponded with the situation now. In a surprise attack, a massive paw appeared, and directly damaged the undefended main palace, reaching the treasure trove directly. But there was no lack of elites on the Heavenly River King's side, either. Immediately, they proceeded to counterattack, and snapped this giant paw off. Ling Han imagined that scene happening, and couldn't help but feel fired up. A battle on the level of Saint Kings would definitely shatter the heavens and crack the earth. It might even be able to destroy stars. He cautiously descended through the crack in the ground. There was a space there that would allow 3 people to pass through, but the massive paw was just right next to it. He did not dare make any big movements, or it would definitely be an action of courting death. Slightly less than half a day later, Ling Han finally managed to climb down. He felt that the clothing on his back was already completely wet with sweat. He breathed a long sigh of relief, and only then did he survey his surroundings. This was indeed a treasure trove, and there were innumerable god tools and godly metal stored here. That mountain path previously had been paved with level 16 godly metal, and just think, even level 16 godly metal was only used as paving stones. So, how valuable would those treasures be that deserved a place in this treasure trove? Level 17, level 18, level 18, level 20. They were all saintly material. Ling Han immediately grinned, his smile so wide that it almost reached his ears. He was rich. He was rich. He stored everything away without any reservations. Though there were a great many high-grade god tools here, none of them were saint tools, because they did not contain the martial intent imprinted by a saint, so they could not resuscitate themselves. But god tools were still god tools. As long as they landed a direct hit, their murderous aura would enter the body, and the destructive power was similarly frightening. His big brother, second brother, and third brother, each of them should get one. His wives, the Empress and Fenger, should also have one each. He could not forget his 6 disciples, either. Each of them should have one. Additionally, he might also have to exchange for the horn of a true dragon with Long Shengyu auntie, so he had to keep one in reserve, right? Sigh, there was really not enough to go around. As Ling Han stored them away, he sighed mournfully. He also released the Empress so that she could accompany him in his worry. It was certain that countless people would be willing to have this kind of worry. Could it be that this Heavenly River King had burglarized the treasure trove of a major force of the celestial realm? When the Empress saw this, she also received a shock because there was really too much saintly material in this place. But when he thought that they would be swallowed by the divine demon sword in the future anyways, who cared if they were damaged or not? Aside from saintly material, there were still saintly medicines here. But they were not alive. Instead, they had been harvested, which made Ling Han very disappointed. If he could transplant them into the Black Tower, his gains would be even greater. In any case, whether he recognized them or not, he stored them all into the Black Tower. But if there's just this stuff, is it enough to draw the combined attack of so many Saint Kings? The Empress suddenly asked. Ling Han startled. Indeed, these things were all valuable, but if it was claimed that a whole group of Saint Kings moved together just to get a piece of saintly material or saintly medicine, this seemed to be making too much of a fuss over a minor issue, right? Chapter 15:11 Will. There is still a last bit of treasure that has not been gathered. Perhaps the variable lies there. Ling Han looked towards the depths of the treasure trove. Ordinarily, the more valuable the treasure, the deeper it would be stored away. Empress Luan Xing was also filled with anticipation. Though her ancestor came from the celestial realm, aside from her bloodline and its perks, she actually did not obtain any other benefits. Thus, she was very curious what a treasure of the celestial realm would look like. The two of them continued to gather the things around the treasure, and this whole treasure trove was soon emptied out. In front of them, only a low table was left. There was a jade box on top. It wouldn't be another world hidden in a box, right? Ling Han and the Empress exchanged looks. Right until this moment, they had not yet discovered anything above saint level. Indeed, this treasure trove was considerably valuable, but if it was a massive migration of the forces of the celestial realm, their wealth would also attain this level. Previously, Ling Han had viewed Ding Zixian's memories, and had some understanding of the wealth of the Ding Zixian, and the Ding clan was a severing mundane tier-level force. This kind of ancestor was actually numbered in the tens. Obviously, it was impossible that this was a top-tier clan of the celestial realm. The wealth of the Ding clan would not be so inferior. Thus, if it was claimed that a forbidden land ganged up on the Heavenly River King just because of this, Ling Han would not believe that in the slightest. Perhaps an astonishing precious treasure lay hidden within the jade box. Careful, the Empress advised. Her right hand was tightly holding the brick. If things didn't look right, she would immediately slam down the brick. Ling Han nodded, and placed both hands on the jade box, slowly opening it. The jade box was not heavy at all, and was easily opened. A golden light spread out, but it did not have much destructive power. However, it was filled with a great aura, as if an ancient god was about to awaken. As the box gradually opened, the golden light covered the whole underground treasure trove, and even surged out of the palace and filled the skies. But it was only for a short instant. The golden light faded, and there were actually 2 pieces of paper that were rolled up inside the box. This was considered a treasure. Even if these 2 pieces of paper were the decree of a Saint King, it could only be used a limited number of times and lasted for only a short time. It was even less worthy of the Forbidden Lands moving out in attack. Strange. Ling Han was startled. He discovered traces of blood on one of the rolled-up papers. Merely a little bit made him feel as if the heavens were pressing down on him. It was an indescribably heavy pressure. This definitely belonged to a supreme elite. Thankfully, this drop of blood did not have any killing intent. Otherwise, a single drop of blood from a saint would be enough to kill any eternal river tier. Ling Han wanted to take out this roll of paper, but discovered that it was actually extraordinarily heavy. No matter how much force he exerted, the paper did not move at all, and there was no sign that it was going to unroll. "I don't believe I can't handle you," Ling Han humphed. Since the blood did not contain killing intent, he directly used his divine sense to wrap around the jade box. Then with a single thought, the jade box was drawn into the Black Tower. Now that it was in the Black Tower, even if it was a Saint King, so what? He would still be killed. When one came right down to it, Ling Han's biggest trump card was the Black Tower. Even the indestructible Heaven Scroll had been inherited from the Black Tower. Too bad, he still could not use the Black Tower as he liked. Otherwise, he should be invincible in the immortal realm. It was as light as a piece of paper. This was a piece of paper in the first place. It had only become so incredible because there was a blood stain on it. "Is it the blood of a Saint King?" Ling Han asked as he raised his head, but the one he directed the question to was not Empress Luan Xing. Small Tower appeared quietly, and lightly shook. It replied, "That's right. It might have been left behind by the Heavenly River King," Ling Han deduced. Empress Luan Xing merely smiled slightly, and did not rush him. In front of Ling Han, her patience was astonishingly good. To her, Ling Han was the real treasure that was the most valuable in this world. She possessed this person, and it was equivalent to possessing the whole world. Ling Han slowly unrolled the paper. It was rolled up like a decree, and suppressed by a drop of blood. It could last for eternity, or the power of time would be able to destroy everything. A letter. Ling Han swept an eye over it. This was not a decree. To be precise, it was not a letter, but rather a will. He stood beside the Empress, and began to read. After a long time, they placed the will down, and both mostly figured out what had happened all those years ago. This will was indeed the most valuable treasure in this room, not the will itself, but a piece of information it had left behind. To start from the very beginning. The Heavenly River King was not from a forbidden land, but he was an ancient prodigy. After he awoke his bloodline, his path of martial arts became very smooth, and he also came to know of the existence of the celestial realm from the ancestral teachings that had been passed down through the generations. But after so many years, there were actually a considerable number of ancient tribes that did not believe in the existence of the celestial realm, and thought this was merely a lie spoken by one of their ancestors. At first, the Heavenly River King did not believe it, either, but as his bloodline became stronger and stronger, he gradually believed in its existence, and set out on his path to search for any traces of the celestial realm. However, the result was that he was still completely clueless about the celestial realm. However, he did find the abode wherein a celestial king had died. He only knew that a massive turmoil had happened at the time. This saint king charged out of the celestial realm all by himself, and ultimately died. The treasures that he had brought with him were all obtained by the Heavenly River King. The majority were the saintly materials that Ling Han had seen. This did not overly match with what Small Tower had said, about how godly metal above level 20 was divine metal. Otherwise, how could a celestial king not possess level 21 godly metal, or 5th grade divine metal, or something of the like? None, above top grade saintly material was divine metal, instant success. But even a celestial king did not possess divine metal. This meant that even in the celestial realm, divine metal would also definitely be an incredibly valuable material. Ling Han couldn't help but tighten his hold on the divine demon sword. Before his abilities had reached great accomplishment level, revealing the divine demon sword in the celestial realm was not a good thing. What if it was recognized by others? Perhaps even a celestial king would hunt him down. In the celestial realm, there should be many elites that could see through the Black Tower. This was no longer an absolutely impenetrable shelter. Let's get back to the topic. The Heavenly River King obtained the treasures left behind by a celestial king. Though there was not much, it was enough to allow the Heavenly River King to emerge as a new force and soar in status. But this was not his largest good fortune. Among the treasures left behind by the Celestial King, there were also directions to a certain location, the ancestral grounds of this celestial realm. Even in the celestial realm, none knew of it. Even if they did, they still needed a special method to be able to open it, and this method was also in the hands of the Heavenly River King. The Heavenly River King had long desired to charge into the celestial realm. At the same time, he also gathered some people who shared his ambition, such as the 12 generals. They were all from ancient tribes, or it would be impossible for all of them to have reached the level of great saint. But at this time when the Heavenly River King was most complacent, he suffered the combined attack of a great many forbidden lands, and the root of the trouble lay in his most trusted assistant, Open Cloud's King. He was like a brother to him, yet informed and contacted the various great forbidden lands to set up an ambush on the path where the chariot pulled by the 3 phoenixes would definitely pass. Chapter 15 12 Blood of a Saint King. After this battle, 11 of the 12 generals died in battle, and the last only managed to escape with the Heavenly River King, protecting him at the risk of his own life. However, in the end he still died. Thankfully, this person entered into a small world, and escaped the pursuit of the Forbidden Lands. He also built the 12 palaces mystery realms, and passed on the treasures left behind by the Heavenly River King. And though the Heavenly River King had endured the combined attack of Saint Kings from a great many forbidden lands, he was really amazing. In that kind of situation, He had still seriously injured the Open Clouds King and left behind this will and sent the chariot away, while he himself blocked those Saint Kings from pursuing. Of course, he had still died in the end. If he had managed to still stay alive after being ganged up on by so many Saint Kings, that would really have been too illogical. Being able to reach Saint King level in the immortal realm was like being able to reach the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier in a small world. They were all top-grade prodigious elites. The Heavenly River King said that since we have obtained the treasures he left behind, we would have to kill the Open Clouds King on his behalf. Otherwise, his blood would become a curse and pester us eternally. Ling Han wore a strange expression. When he finished reading this will, it was as if that drop of blood had come back to life, and was about to sink into the bodies of Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing. Even if a Saint King had died for millions and millions of years, his obsession was still incredibly frightening, and could kill small saints and medium saint. It was possible for even weaker great saints to suffer disaster. Unfortunately, this was inside the Black Tower. Putting aside the fact that this was only a drop of blood from a Saint King and a sliver of obsession, even if it was a Saint King himself, so what? Ling Han would definitely not allow a drop of blood from another to enter his body, much less his wife. He said to that drop of blood, "Please rest assured, Senior. When I have become a great saint or a Saint King, I will definitely seek out that Open Clouds King for an accounting." The motive behind the Open Clouds King's rebellion was naturally the treasures left behind by the Celestial King. He had long since known the location of the ancestral grounds of the Celestial King, but the method to open it was only known to the Heavenly River King, and now it was also known by Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing. Yet the Open Clouds King had still obtained a secret technique of the Celestial King. Even if he didn't become a Celestial King, it should not be too difficult for him to use it to break through to the Celestial Realm. However, the Heavenly River King had severely wounded the Open Clouds King, and injured his life force, which also severed his hopes of advancing into the Severing Mundane. Thus, Ling Han needed only advance to become a great saint or Saint King level, and he would be qualified to kill the Open Clouds King. The person that the Heavenly River King hated the most was the Open Clouds King. At the time, he delivered a serious wound onto the Open Clouds King even at the risk of his life because he did not want the latter to be capable of entering into the Celestial Realm. Then, even if no one managed to obtain the treasures he had left behind in the end, the Open Clouds King would still die of old age, unable to achieve immortality. Of course, it would naturally be best if someone could give him a chance at revenge. Betrayed by his most trusted, loving each other but wanting to kill each other at the same time, not willing to rest until the other is dead, Ling Han mused ruefully. He could not imagine how it would feel like if Feng Peyun, the Rain Emperor, and Murong Qing stabbed him in the back. No matter how valuable this treasure was, could its value compare to their brotherhood? I think if the Open Clouds King had asked, the Heavenly River King would likely not have refused. Otherwise, he would not have been so furious after being betrayed. Ling Han shook his head. Empress Luan Xing continued, "Perhaps, the Open Clouds King had never trusted the Heavenly River King fully. From the very beginning, his motive was to gain benefits from the Heavenly River King, and thus he thought others were like him as well. He thought that the Heavenly River King would definitely not reveal the secret to him, and would even be on guard against him. Hence, he simply decided to take the risk, and invite the wolf into the house." Ling Han shook his head. Going by the look of things, it was possible that this massive paw that had pierced through the treasure trove belonged to the Open Clouds King. He naturally best knew the location of the treasure trove. "This old bastard even damaged so much of my godly metal and saintly material, I will not spare him," he said through clenched teeth. This massive paw had damaged who knew how much saintly material, causing his heart to ache severely. Meanwhile, Empress Luan Xing smiled in spite of herself, shaking her head. She had not thought that Ling Han would have such an adorable side to him. There was still a scroll left behind, and this was really the decree of a saint. The strongest attack of the Heavenly River King was sealed within. However, the Heavenly River King was already at the end of his line at the time. It was already very impressive he managed to leave behind a will. Thus, the defense of this decree was not that strong. As time passed, the majority of power and regulations in this decree had eroded, and its might now was only at the late stage of the Eternal River tier. Even its saintly might was gone. Furthermore, it could only be used once. This drop of blood can be used though, Ling Han thought. This was not an ordinary Saint King's blood, but rather the blood essence of a Saint King. Even the Heavenly River King did not have so many drops in him. Otherwise, how could it possibly ensure that a piece of paper would last for eternity? The divinity in the blood essence had already been mostly worn away, but the murderous aura of a Saint King was still present. Thrown out, this would still possess incredibly frightening might. I've got another trump card. Too bad it can only be used once, just like the decree. Though he was saying that, Ling Han was still all smiles. If he used this thing at the right time, even a great saint would shiver. Small Tower, though, was disdainful. It is merely the blood of a Saint King, and you are already so happy. This is really embarrassing me. Ling Han did not concede and said, whether I am happy or otherwise, what business is it of yours? In any case, you are the master of the Black Tower, and possess the most powerful precious tool in this world, yet still lose your composure because of a drop of blood from a Saint King. As a tool spirit, even I am ashamed of you, Small Tower stated calmly. I have never met as rebellious a tool spirit as you. Ling Han extended a finger, stabbing at Small Tower. However, Small Tower did not have any solid form, so this finger had directly passed through it. Now you have met one, Small Tower said calmly. Ling Han was so infuriated he shouted. He had also experienced many exchanges with a large black dog, and could be considered skilled at making caustic remarks, but in front of Small Tower, he had to admit defeat. This damn guy always had a monotonous voice, but took its enjoyment from mocking others. However, Ling Han was not really angered. Soon he calmed down and asked, I know that severing mundane tier lies above saint level, then what is above the severing mundane? He was very curious. Yet Small Tower did not have the slightest change in emotion, and replied, if you want to ask how strong a Celestial King is, then I can tell you, even if I currently use my full power, I am no match for a Celestial King. Ling Han was shocked. Small Tower had never shrunk back before. It had not shown its might all this while merely because it feared alerting the mighty figures in the Celestial Realm. And according to this, that would be the Celestial King. Celestial King in the Celestial Realm. What level did an existence like that belong to? If that was already the peak, then that was fine. Ling Han only had to be wary of those few people, but if there was still a mix of elites above Celestial King, then every step he took after entering into the Celestial Realm would be difficult. Sigh, when that old witch came, I should have asked her for more details. Chapter 15-13 Big Sweep. The old witch Ling Han was talking about was the old woman by Hu Niu's side. Because Hu Niu called her old witch, Ling Han went with that address as well. When he thought of Hu Niu, Ling Han naturally thought of Hellion Sun Shui, his parents, his son, and the others that the little jealous lover had taken away with her. Involuntarily, he could not help but miss them more. Over 100 years had already passed. Were they all doing well? His son may already have become a father himself. But it was not definite. Perhaps his son had focused completely on cultivation, and did not have time to chase girls. At this time, Ling Han was at a bit of a loss. He wanted his son to marry early and possess his own happiness, yet at the same time, he hoped his son had not married so he could personally participate in his son's wedding. Sigh, what's the use of thinking so much? There is nothing I can do. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then gave up. In any case, he was still in the immortal realm, and was unable to go to the celestial realm for the moment, so no matter how much he pondered over the matter, it was useless. Let's go, Empress Luanxing said to Ling Han. They should make their rounds at the other peaks, and think of a way to set up a trap for Gu Dawi. Ling Han nodded and said, too bad the Heavenly River King did not manage to pass on the cultivation technique of the Celestial King in time, or we would really get rich on this trip. He did not know what level of king-tier Celestial Kings were considered to be at in the Celestial Realm, but they were definitely higher than severing mundane tier, and being able to lay claim to the word king, could they really be ordinary elites? Thus, the cultivation technique of a Celestial King would definitely be extremely precious. Empress Luanxing took a few steps, and then suddenly said with a soft hum, previously, you recited a few celestial words, which drew out a reaction from my bloodline, and seemed to help me awaken a few memories. The ancestor of my 9 snakes tribe is precisely a Celestial King. The Heavenly River King obtained the inheritance of a Celestial King, so it was logical that he would know celestial words, and they might not even be ordinary celestial words, but rather celestial words on the level of Celestial King. And this had drawn a reaction from Empress Luan Xing's bloodline, which also meant indirectly that the Empress's ancestor was a celestial king. She is cultivating the 9 Deaths Heaven art. Ordinarily, a cultivation technique that is called a heaven art would be the technique of a celestial king. Small Tower suddenly voiced out. Ling Han was shocked. He had not thought that this guy would suddenly pipe up. You don't know the hierarchy of elites in the celestial realm, yet actually recognize the 9 Deaths Heaven art. A living person is right in front of me, and I still can't tell? Do you think I am as stupid as a pig like you? Small Tower retorted coldly. The Empress was also furious, and rebuked Small Tower. Do not insult my husband. Small Tower was completely indifferent. It was just a tool spirit, so how could it possibly take note of the beauty or ugliness of humans? The Empress's charms had completely zero effect on it. Ling Han also knew Small Tower had a sharp tongue, but did not mind much. Otherwise, he would have long since died of fury from this guy's venom. He asked, going by that logic, I am cultivating the indestructible heaven scroll, so is that also a celestial king's technique? TSK, who told you that a heaven scroll and heaven art are the same? Small Tower's disdain was even clearer. The indestructible heaven scroll is a supreme cultivation technique that the heavenly venerable tier has created from studying the techniques of a good many celestial kings, combined with his own comprehension. You can just laugh at your own good fortune. In my opinion, it would be very difficult for you to reach celestial king tier. Bah! Ling Han gave it the middle finger. Just because of your words, not only will I become a celestial king, I will also become one that surpasses other celestial kings. I'll be waiting, Small Tower said calmly, and then slowly disappeared. The Empress had a strange expression. Why do I feel that it is trying to spur you on? Even if it is spurring me on, I am also determined to surpass Celestial King. This guy is too despicable. There will come a day that I will toss it into the toilet. Ling Han uttered in displeasure. Of course, this was an empty threat. If he really tossed the Black Tower into the toilet, how was he supposed to use it again in future? The Empress merely smiled gently, and placed a hand on Ling Han's arm. The two of them exited the Black Tower together. It was still the underground treasure trove, and the massive paw was still stabbing into it, exuding a cold sharpness. The two of them carefully left. The Empress was slightly strained, but with the brick in her hold, she managed to carry on. They looked down from the summit. There were a total of 14 peaks here, and there was a palace atop each peak. Going by that deduction, the remaining 13 palaces should be the quarters of the Open Cloud's king and the 12 generals, respectively. Come, let's do a sweep. Ling Han was filled with confidence. He now had the decree of a Saint King, as well as a drop of blood essence from a Saint King, so he was very sure of himself. Naturally, there was no need to use the blood essence of a Saint King to deal with a few eternal river tears. That thing was a consumable item, and definitely should be used to deal with more powerful enemies. Thus, he would take out that Saint King's decree at most. In any case, its might had mostly decreased. He wasn't very far away from this level of battle prowess himself, so even if he used it, it would not be too much of a waste. Ha! They ascended a mountain peak. The steps here were also laid out by godly metal, but they were not level 16. Instead, they were level 15. This should be the Open Cloud's King's Peak, and was slightly inferior to the main peak. Take them. Ling Han was not reserved at all, prying all of them all the way to the summit. In the meantime, Wuxia and his group also saw that they had left the main peak, yet actually did not come over to pick a fight with them. That's right. They are in no rush to make a move, because they are deliberately waiting for us to gather the treasures. Then they will take us down, and these treasures would naturally belong to them, which would save them both the effort and energy. Ling Han soon deduced. He exchanged a look with the Empress, and both of them broke out into smiles. It was still undecided who would be the one doing the robbing. Then we will not be in a rush to make our move, either. Ling Han saw that Wuxia and his group were also digging out steps, and they still dared to call him Country Bumpkin. TSK. They dug the steps all the way to the peak. There was another palace here, but there weren't many treasures here. Ling Han only found a brocade. This was a valuable item. It was woven from level 17 silk combined with godly metal. Not only was it incredibly tough and durable, It also had a very good effect of removing force. Durability and removing force were different. If it was merely durable, such as clothing, then when a sword stabbed it, it indeed could not penetrate it. However, the force of the attack would still be transmitted, and could still cause damage. But if there was the effect of removing force, things would be different. It would be equivalent to channeling one's origin power to cancel out the attack, so the impact would be further decreased. If one included formations and martial intent along with, it could be made into a treasured robe. Actually, these brocades were bed curtains. The Open Cloud's king was disdainful of using such saintly material as his armor. Wife, these can probably be made into quite a few suits, right? Hee, we're rich. Ling Han laughed loudly. The Empress gave it some thought and replied, actually, it can't make that many suits. Making a treasured robe would expend a lot of materials. We'll just make as many as we can. Ling Han also knew that he had already gained a lot of profit. Chapter 15-14 Second Encounter. Hu Kan and his group were once again calm and unruffled. There was no hindering by the mountain winds here, so they could use their full strength. In that case, how easy would it be to suppress Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing? They were merely easy prey. Fairy, why do you have to follow this kind of trash? Just join our 8 stones forbidden land, Hu Kan said to Empress Luan Xing. Ordinarily, it was extremely difficult to enter into a certain forbidden land. To maintain the purity of the bloodline of their 8 stones tribe, they only chose their spouses from within the clan. As long as they weren't actual siblings, marriage was possible among cousins. But with how astonishingly beautiful Empress Luan Xing was, he naturally had to put all his efforts to strive for her. Worst come to worst, they could choose not to have children. These words were said right in front of Ling Han. Actually, he was deliberately delivering a blow against Ling Han, who asked them to experience so many losses previously. If he didn't deliver a few blows to this person, it truly would not be enough to vent his ire. Empress Luan Xing didn't even look at Hu Kan. Wasn't that mere nonsense coming from a fool? She didn't even want to bother with him. Ugly people would do all kinds of things to get attention. This was the Empress's style of contempt, causing Hu Kan and the other men to feel displeased internally. Let me beat him to death. Hu Bing was the first to jump out. He had always felt defiant, thinking that the only reason he had not been a match for Ling Han previously was due to the mountain winds. Yet Hu Kan stretched out an arm and pulled him back. He shook his head. Hu Bing was definitely not a match for this brat. It was very simple. He had used half of his power, and was still unable to take Ling Han down. Was Hu Bing half as strong as he was? What a joke. He was not even as strong as a 10,000th of him. They had already lost 3 consecutive rounds. How could they continue to seek their own humiliation? Brother Kan. Hu Bing was defiant. He was a prodigy that had walked out from a forbidden land. What person of the same cultivation level in the immortal realm could put up a fight against him? Hu Kan shot a glare at him, and Hu Bing immediately dared not say anything else. How should I address you? Hu Kan asked. Ling Han quirked his lips in a grin and replied, you guys want to kill me, so I don't have to be reserved either, and will just kill you all. Hence, you all will soon become a pile of corpses. What use is there for you to know my name? So arrogant. Hu Kan smirked coldly. This was a battle of 7 against 2, and they had the advantage in numbers. Furthermore, Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing were both only in the low extreme. The gap in cultivation level was like the gap between heaven and earth. Where did you get all this confidence from? Whether I'm arrogant or not, you will only know the answer after a battle. Ling Han's fists trembled. Charge! Hu Kan shot out. Channeling the 8 stones body art, his body turned into a massive rock figure that could not be harmed by any weapon or affected by any technique. As he had attained the 2nd level of the 8 stones technique, he should be invincible among his peers in the Eternal River tier. Unless his foe was in the pinnacle level, they would not be able to hurt him. If it was not because there was power of regulation of Genesis tier in the mountain winds, how could he have lost to them? Ling Han drew out the broken wooden sword. Before the grade of the divine demon sword was raised, it was still the broken wooden sword that was more useful. Otherwise, if he used the divine demon sword against an elite in the consummate level of the Eternal River tier, it would definitely shatter with a single strike. Before he entered into the celestial realm, the might of the broken wooden sword was actually not inferior to the divine demon swords. One after another, demonic patterns appeared, and a frightening killing intent surged forth. Saint Tool! Hukan became apprehensive, and then shook his head. Demonic tool! A look of envy appeared on his face. Even he did not have a corresponding Saint Tool. Even though the Forbidden Lands had astonishing wealth, there was a large number of them. They had expanded too much because they had come with their whole families. Just look at the Stone Emperor. He was the only child of his old man, so whatever treasures were definitely going to be left to him. Thus, the Stone Emperor could ride a saint-level chariot, and he also had armor made of saintly material that was not inferior in any respect. As for the Forbidden Lands, 7 prodigies that were not inferior to the Stone Emperor in any way had so easily appeared. But did the Forbidden Land really have so many saint tools? They had not obtained the inheritance of a celestial king. They had to have saint tools, and perhaps there were a good many too, but the number definitely did not reach the extent where all the juniors could each possess one. Hukan was naturally jealous. He was also filled with a strong wariness. That was a saint tool. It was nothing to joke about if he was hit even once with it. Furthermore, Ling Han was not an ordinary low-extreme cultivator, either. His battle prowess could even match half of his strength, and added with a demonic tool, that was like doubling his power. His expression was very solemn. Drawing out the distance from Ling Han, they exchanged blows. Ling Han waved the sword to parry the incoming attacks. His strength was much too inferior to Hukan's. Even if he used the 10 formations at the same time, he was still far from becoming a match for him. Thankfully, he had Tide of the Ages that could largely dispense most of the attacks, and added with his frightening physique, the damage that Hukan could deliver to him was extremely limited. Even if he was wounded, it would also be instant recovery with his recovery abilities, so it did no harm. Hukan finally let go of his pride and declared, "Let's attack together and kill this man." Ling Han already knew the secret behind the Heavenly River King's treasures, so he definitely had to be killed. Hu Bing and the other 2 men immediately leaped out, ganging up on him without any hesitation. Hu Shuyu and the other women, though, targeted Empress Luan Xing, and surrounded her in a well-coordinated movement. In the eyes of Hukan and his group, the Empress was an unmatchable treasure, but in the eyes of Hu Shuyu and the other women, the Empress was a thorn in their side that had to be removed at all costs. Otherwise, the jealousy would drive them crazy. Just the thought that there was actually such a perfect woman in this world made their hearts clench. The Empress was fearless, and drew out the brick. Both sides erupted in battle. Whether it was Ling Han or Empress Luan Xing, they were both at a disadvantage. The gap in numbers and cultivation level was too large, and the only reason why they managed to continue fighting was because one of them had a strong physique, while the other had the aid of the absolute beginning stone. If it was another person, they would have long since died over a few hundred times. But going on like this was not a good thing. Ling Han was still fine, but the Empress could only depend on the absolute beginning stone, after all. If she exhausted all her origin power, it would be dangerous. A ferocious light appeared in Ling Han's eyes, and he declared, "Since you all are so determined to seek death, you cannot blame others for it." He endured a few heavy blows, and rushed to the side of Empress Luan Xing. He drew her into the Black Tower, and then took out the Saint's Decree. Without a second thought, he opened it directly. Boom! All of a sudden, a terrifying pressure seeped out, and boundless golden light appeared in waves. "Oh no, it's a Saint's Decree!" Hukan's expression changed drastically. "And the might seems to be very weak." Hu Shuyu suddenly realized that something was off with it. This is the decree of a saint, but too much time has passed, so its initial might is no longer present. He must have gotten this in the main palace. We'll work together, and it would be fine if we endure for a while. The majority of power has already seeped out from the saint's decree. Right. The 7 of them combined forces. At this time, the decree had already exploded with a frightening killing intent, blasting towards them. It did not even need Ling Han to actively control it. The decree would attack all other parties aside from its holder. This was also the weakness of a decree, as it did not differentiate between allies and foes. If one wanted to make it so that the might of a decree could be controlled, there was a need to spend even more effort and time to forge it. At the time, It was obvious that it was impossible for the Heavenly River King to do that. Not good, though the power inside this decree is weak. Why is the power of regulation so frightening? Hu Jing exclaimed in shock. It had only been a short while, and she was already covered with wounds. The situation was approaching a crisis. Are we really going to die here? I have no wish to die. The 7 of them exclaimed. They were filled with even more regret. If they had known that this trip would be so dangerous, they would have begged for a decree from their senior clansmen at all costs. Even if it was not written by a saint king, it was fine as long as it had reached saint level. But if they really had had a saint's decree, Ling Han would have simply drawn out that drop of blood essence. Bring it on. Chapter 15:15 Total Annihilation. When a saint's decree showed its might, all of Hu Kan's group were covered with wounds. They had completely no way to withstand it. When they finally managed to last until the power of the decree had passed, all of them were severely wounded. Though none of them had died, their vitality was greatly damaged, and their strength had also dropped to rock bottom. Sword in hand, Ling Han charged out without any hesitation. He had been polite, but they did not want to accept his kindness. Not only did they want to kill him, they dared to have designs on his wife, the Empress. He naturally could not spare them. Cripple them. Kill them. Eliminate them. Fuck. Did they think that they were the only ones who could show their might from their haughty positions? Did they think he didn't have a temper? The sword swept past, and blood sprayed out. Having tasted human blood, the broken wooden sword became even more hideous. Black demonic chi surged out from the sword's blade and rushed around Ling Han, making it seem as if he had transformed into a great demon of the netherworld. Pooh! Hu Bing was weakest, and also became the fastest to die. The sword swept past, and blood spurted into the skies. His head also dropped onto the ground, a disbelieving expression still present on his face. He was a prodigy of the Forbidden Land. With such a powerful force backing him, someone actually still dared to kill him. With his head severed by the broken wooden sword, it naturally meant instant death. How dare you! The eyes of Hu Kan and the others all became bloodshot. No matter how much they had been at a disadvantage previously, they were still filled with a deep pride. Coming from a forbidden land, they looked down on all others in the immortal realm. That was because they thought they belonged to the celestial realm, so how could trash from this realm compare to them? But with the death of Hu Bing, their hearts throbbed violently. That pride and inbred arrogance was completely erased. They had become afraid. This demon really dared to make a move on them. Even the Forbidden Land couldn't scare him off. We are people from the 8 Stones Forbidden Land, and have a total of 3 ancestors. They are all saint kings, and the saints in our Forbidden Land number by the hundreds. You dare make a move on us, your fate will be to die a tragic death. Hu Kan and his group threw out the 8 Stones Forbidden Land. Now, this was their last hope that could save them. Ling Han only acted as if he had not heard them. Since he was already filled with killing intent, there was no possible way for him to stop. No matter whom they threw out, it would not be enough to scare him off. Kill, kill, kill. One after another, heads flew. One after another, they collapsed, and very soon, the only ones remaining alive were Hu Kan and Hu Shuyu. Run! Hu Kan called out to Hu Shuyu. Hu Shuyu nodded. Previously, they had kept fighting because they had been held back by Hu Bing and the others. How could they leave these people behind and flee for their own lives? But the present situation was different. The others had all died, so there was no significance in continuing to fight to the death. Furthermore, if all of them died here, that would be a pointless death. How were they going to avenge themselves? One should know that their ancestor had concealed the twists of fate, and it would last for about a year's time at least. Thus, even if their ancestor did another fortune-telling on the spur of the moment, that would be a matter of a year later. Where would he go to hunt down their murderer? Their ancestor was only a saint king, and not an omnipotent celestial king. The 2 of them immediately fled in 2 separate directions. As long as one of them managed to escape alive, and enter into the starship outside, the starship's defense was naturally not something that Ling Han could penetrate. Xiao, his origin power became a streak of light that chased quickly on the heels of Hu Shuyu. This archery technique had fused with the tide of the ages and the blood crow formation. It was visible that when the streak of light flew out, it became a divine blood crow. As its wings flapped, its speed was further boosted. What? Because Wuxian was no longer the target of attack, he had the energy to turn around and look. He couldn't help but look stunned. The annihilating dragon star arrow. You are a survivor of the Heavenly River King's force. The annihilating dragon star arrow was the ultimate technique of one of the 12 generals. At the time, it had killed a considerable number of great saints, and had even posed a considerable threat to the Saint Kings. Because of this, even if Wuxian had not seen it himself, he had still occasionally heard about it from his seniors, so he remembered it clearly. Thus, he recognized it with a single look. However, as for why the annihilating dragon star arrow would become a blood crow at the end, he could not provide an explanation for it. But this did not hinder the might of this strike. It had even far surpassed his understanding. Pooh! The blood crow caught up to Wuxia with only a flap of its wings and sank into her heart. A spray of blood spurted out, and she collapsed loudly on the ground. Ordinarily, immortals were very, very difficult to kill. Even if their physical bodies were completely destroyed, as long as their spirit had not been damaged, they could still find an empty shell and come back to life. However, Ling Han's attack had even blended in the 9 heavens flame. With an immortal flame in her body, could she still manage to stay alive? Wuxian's whole body was covered with cold sweat. Hurriedly, he turned around and fled. By now, he had lost all his fighting spirit, and merely wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. Then, he could ask one of the great elites of the Forbidden Land to move out and hunt Ling Han to the corners of this world. None of you can escape. Ling Han shot out another arrow. This time, he had used the ultimate arrow. Pooh! A streak of light swept out, and Wuxian's body suddenly flew, drawing out an arc in midair, and collapsing heavily onto the ground. Blood poured out beneath him, his eyes wide and filled with fury and defiance. He was a prodigy of this generation, and actually died in such a stupid manner. How could he possibly rest in peace? Ling Han though shook his head. Wuxian should be inferior to big shots like Ran Feiyun and the others. He had seen a battle between the 3 great big shots, and they were at least a whole level stronger than Wuxian. He picked out the spatial spirit tools of the 7 people, and moved all the things inside into the Black Tower. He obtained another great amount of high-level godly metal. This trip was really worth it. As long as the Divine Demon Sword can be improved to level 14, it can rush up to level 17 in a single go, and become a saint tool. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly. Previously, he had not placed any importance on this treasure trove at all, and had merely wanted to set up a trap for Gu Dawi. I can't forget my proper business. Ling Han immediately began planning. How should he allow the news about the Heavenly River King's treasure trove appearing to leak out such that it would seem normal? Gu Dawi was no idiot. Having been able to become a severing mundane ancestor, he definitely had to be astute and circumspect. What Ling Han was betting on was the fact that he was presently a reincarnated body, and did not have the calm nature that he had once had. Furthermore, he definitely wanted to return to the celestial realm urgently. Otherwise, he could have worked hard on cultivation on his own. What was the point of his entering into the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy in that case? Let's go out and take a look. Who knows how Fenger is now? The 2 of them exited the chest, and saw that a dead silence had fallen on this corner of the galaxy. The corpses of the 3 Phoenix Kings were no longer shining, but they were still tightly embracing each other, and did not leak out even a bit of light. Going by the situation now, it won't end any time soon. Ling Han recalled how the Rain Emperor had obtained the inheritance of an Eternal River Tier elite, and had spent at least 20 years to fully digest the benefits he had gained. And that was just an Eternal River Tier. Now they were dealing with Saint Kings. This is good too. With these 3 Phoenix Kings here, it would be more convincing. Furthermore, as long as a Saint King has not appeared, no one can possibly hurt Fenger. Ling Han thought about it for a moment, and tied this chariot to the cloud-piercing shuttle. Pulling the corpses of the 3 Phoenix Kings behind him, they headed back to the wood figure planet. Of course, they had to drag it closer. Otherwise, how long would Gu Dawi have to spend on this trip? He did not have the cloud-piercing shuttle. The cloud-piercing shuttle reversed its original course, and took merely over a dozen days, which soon passed. Ling Han pulled the chariot to a barren planet, and then blasted a massive hole, making it so it seemed as if this chariot had just burst out of the ground. As for the details, he was uncaring. Were the corpses of 3 Phoenix Kings not convincing enough? He quietly returned to the academy, and began to use saintly medicine to cook a soup. Chapter 1516 Ingesting Saint Pill. Ling Han had obtained some saintly medicine, but at his present cultivation level, he was still not qualified to refine it into alchemical pills yet. Thus, he decided to settle for the next best thing. He would not refine it into alchemical pills. Instead, he directly extracted the divine essence from within through heating. The effects from this were definitely inferior to an alchemical pill. There would definitely be a certain amount of wastage, but Ling Han merely wanted to improve his abilities as soon as possible, so he did not bother about it. If he cooked this outside, this would lead to too much commotion. The divine essence of the saintly medicine was not something that Ling Han could conceal. If he actually drew the attention of the saints, should he share with them or not? Thus, he concocted everything within the Black Tower, planning to silently reap the benefits. Furthermore, it was much more efficient to concoct inside this place. There was no need for him to worry about his cultivation level lacking, causing his loss of control over the situation. In merely 3 days, the saintly medicine had been cooked into a soup. Ling Han had long since told Zhou Yao to inform the others. The Rain Emperor, Ding Ping, the Notionless Saint, and the others entered into the Black Tower to enjoy this rare saintly medicine soup. This was an extremely nutritious item, but everyone's cultivation level was too low, especially of those aside from Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing. None of the others had entered into the Eternal River tier, so they could only drink a little soup, and could not touch the saintly medicine at all. If they actually consumed it, they would definitely explode from the frightening medicinal effects. Even so, their whole bodies were still glowing with divine light. Opening their mouths, they actually spat out red clouds. The medicinal effects of the saintly medicine were too shocking. Even if they had only drunk a little soup, it was still a supremely precious treasure. Even they ended up like this. What more Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing? Ling Han was still fine, but the Empress's cheeks were dyed a rosy hue due to the medicinal effects, presenting an indescribably exquisite sight. Ding Ping, Zhou Yao, and the others couldn't help but turn their heads away, not daring to look at her. Without another word, everyone hurriedly ran over to the reincarnation tree to digest the medicinal effects. Not only would saintly medicine increase one's accumulation of origin power, there was also the regulations of great Tao contained within. However, whether one could digest the benefits of it would depend on the comprehension ability of the individual. Underneath the reincarnation tree, 1 day was equivalent to a whole year. This naturally could allow the medicinal effects of the saintly medicine to be maximized. Ling Han's whole body was glowing with light. His physique was the most freakish. He had consumed at least 3/4 of that saintly medicine. Though a lot of its medicinal effects had been extracted into the soup, the majority was definitely still contained in the stock of saintly medicine itself. Like a drunk, he was unsteady on his footing. The Black Tower could suppress all external forces, but if he was the one who bloated himself, then even the Black Tower had no way to solve that problem. Everyone fell into a seat, forming a circle around the reincarnation tree, and entering into a meditative state. Ling Han also channeled his technique, absorbing the effects of the saintly medicine. His accumulation of origin power was also soaring up with his absorption. A whole 11 days had passed, and he ended his isolation. I have advanced from the early stage of the low extreme into the middle stage. Ling Han appeared to be excited. Too bad it is saintly medicine. We only obtained a total of 3 stalks. Ling Han sighed. The number the Heavenly River King had obtained should not be just this amount. He probably ingested the rest. Sigh, since you want me to avenge you, why didn't you leave a few more behind for me? There were a total of 3 stalks of saintly medicine, which was barely enough to send him up to the medium extreme. If I want to quickly increase my cultivation level, I will have to depend on saintly medicine, but saintly medicine is not like cabbages that can be found easily. Ling Han shook his head. It would be great if I could get the seeds of some saintly medicine. I could plant them in the Black Tower, and I would be able to harvest a great amount in the future. That may not be the case. small tower suddenly appeared. It was more unpredictable than anyone else in the Black Tower. When the reincarnation tree bears fruit, one would be able to grant you a complete change. Ling Han's eyes lit up. The reincarnation tree was not saintly medicine, but was a supreme treasured tree even in the celestial realm. He hurriedly asked, "How long will it take to bear fruit?" "At least a few 100 million years," small tower estimated. "You just scram!" Ling Han exclaimed helplessly. This damn guy was really just planning to screw him over. However, small tower's tone suddenly changed. "If you can manage to unlock another floor of the Black Tower, I will be able to possess more power, and can shrink this time many times over." Ling Han was cheered up again. If small tower said that it was many times over, then that definitely did not mean 10 times or 100 times, but a few thousand, tens of thousand, or a few million times over. However, small tower made another turnaround. Ling Han couldn't help but complain, "Can't you speak nicely?" "Don't listen if you don't want to." Small tower was acting proud again. Turning around, it was about to leave. "Hold on, finish your words," Ling Han quickly called out. Small tower finally continued. "Because this is growth through a catalyst, and the Black Tower ultimately cannot simulate the regulations of the reincarnation tree, the effects of the reincarnation tree cannot reach their maximum. In fact, it is not even a billionth of it." Though Ling Han felt it was a pity, if he really allowed the reincarnation tree to grow freely in the outside world, that would need 12 trillion years. Who could afford to wait that long? It was good enough that it could be used. "Then I'll be waiting." Ling Han nodded. Now, even a stock of saintly medicine was enough to further boost his cultivation level by a star. Then, what about after he became a saint? The effects of the saintly medicine would be even further decreased. More importantly, how could there be so much saintly medicine in this world? It was not a bad idea to rob the Forbidden Lands. These forces had originated from the celestial realm, and they themselves had astronomical wealth. Added with the fact that they had existed for so many years, they should have cultivated a considerable number of generations of saintly medicine. Every Forbidden Land should have 1 or 2 stocks at least. Ling Han suppressed the temptation in his heart. If he went to the Forbidden Lands now, that would definitely be seeking death. At present, his most important business was Gu Dawi. He would snatch away the latter's divine fetus to help his empress wife to achieve success, and advance into the shattering void tier as soon as possible. His days of happiness were right around the corner. After exiting the Black Tower, he merely walked around outside, and he already heard people talking about a strange and powerful demonic beast pulling a chariot everywhere he went. The 3 Phoenix Kings were now wrapped around each other, and had also withdrawn their divine flame. Who hasn't heard of it by now? An incredibly powerful demonic beast is pulling the chariot, and no one can recognize it. Everyone is deducing that that ancient star must have once had a glorious martial arts civilization, but it was destroyed by an ultra-huge battle. There must be supreme rare treasures hidden within the chest. That's right. Now, more and more of our senior brothers and senior sisters have rushed there, wanting to get hold of the rare treasures in the chest. It is said that there are ancient words on the chest, saying that the scriptures of a celestial king are hidden within. Scriptures of a celestial king. What is that? I don't know either, but it sounds very impressive. Chapter 1517 Precious treasures are a temptation. There was a clue left on the chest. The ancient scriptures of a celestial king were hidden within. This was something that Ling Han had leaked out. It was a complete lie, and his motive was to attract Gu Dawi. You come from the celestial realm, so you naturally know how awesome a cultivation technique of a celestial king could be. The 9 Deaths Heaven art that you've cultivated is a celestial king technique, isn't it? And now, there is another such cultivation technique in front of you. Do you want it? Most importantly, whether it was Gu Dawi or Empress Luan Xing, the 9 Deaths Heaven art they had obtained was not complete, but an incomplete heaven art was treated like a precious treasure by a severing mundane ancestor from the celestial realm like Gu Dawi. Then, how extraordinary would a complete heaven art be? Even if Gu Dawi knew that there was something off, he would definitely venture there. In the face of a precious treasure, it would be difficult not to be tempted. Not bad, not bad. Though the whole matter of the treasure trove, could not survive a real examination, it was all right. As long as the treasure trove itself was real, that was fine. As long as Gu Daoyi went, it was all right. Ling Han was filled with confidence. Even if Gu Daoyi had been gifted a great many treasures by the Star Sand Saint, as long as he used the blood essence of the Star Sand Saint, that would definitely be enough to suppress all of them unless the Star Sand Saint himself appeared. He had to waste that drop of blood essence from a Saint King to kill Gu Daoyi. Was it a loss? Of course it wasn't. This was all the sake from managing to push down his wife. No, it was for his wife. For the sake of his wife, what was a drop of Saint King blood essence worth? It was about time for him to set out too. What if Gu Daoyi had already set out, and he just happened to miss him? Isn't that little Han in front of me? A voice rang out. Xiao, a strong gale was approaching. Ling Han suddenly shot out his foot in a kick. Damn dog, this trick again. The large black dog turned around and avoided this kick from Ling Han. I was warmly greeting you, and you actually greeted me with violence. I have never seen someone like you. Ling Han scoffed. If he had not lashed out his foot, he would definitely have got a harsh bite from the large black dog, and this damn dog was actually so shameless to make a false countercharge against him. Indeed, its shamelessness knew no limits. Little Black, have you harmed anyone recently? Tui, I only harm you. The large black dog glared at Ling Han. Against anyone else, it had always been successful in every endeavor. It was only against Ling Han that it never really enjoyed the upper hand, which made it feel slightly depressed and also extremely defiant. I can't be bothered to deal with you. I still have something to do. Ling Han headed out of the academy. Do you want to commit murder or arson? Don't forget about Grandpa Dog if you have something good. The large black dog was in high spirits. Ling Han gave it a look. This damn dog was indeed the type to wish for the whole world to be in chaos. They walked boldly out of the academy. Though many students saw them, not one of them stepped out to stop them. There was no need to mention Ling Han. Ling Han's abilities were well known through battles. Even senior brothers in the high extreme of the Eternal River tier had still been harshly defeated. If those in consummate level did not appear, who could match him? In fact, everyone suspected that if the big shots did not move out, even ordinary elites in the consummate level could do nothing against him. The large black dog, meanwhile, had a strong reputation for playing cheap tricks. It never went into a head-on confrontation with anyone. There was once a senior brother who had taught them a lesson through his own mistakes. He had once announced that he would dump the large black dog into a stew and eat its flesh. And what happened? He was so horribly disturbed by the large black dog that he directly withdrew from the academy. A fierce character and a despicable character was walking alongside each other. Who dared approach them to ask for trouble? When they arrived outside, Ling Han drew out the cloud-piercing shuttle. The large black dog forced its way on board. With a clang, its iron underwear crashed onto the seat, creating sparks. Fuck, if you break it, you'll compensate with your life. Ling Han exclaimed with a glare. So petty. The large black dog acted as if it had not heard him, and even moved its behind to find a more comfortable position. Ling Han looked at it with a strange look in his eyes. Brat, what kind of eyes are you having? It's very dangerous. The large black dog felt like its fur was about to stand on ends. Ling Han snickered and replied, It won't take too long, and I will introduce someone to you. The large black dog felt strange. Just go ahead with the introduction. Grandpa Dog has never shrunk back from anyone in this lifetime. Ling Han did not say anything else, and maneuvered the cloud-piercing shuttle into the skies. When the large black dog met Hu Niu in future, only then would it know that there would always be someone better than it. When the despicable dog met the glutton, it would only become a dead dog. Sigh, he really missed that little girl quite a bit. The cloud-piercing shuttle rose up into the skies. Xiao, it pierced through the air, and in a short while, it arrived on the planet where the corpses of the 3 Phoenix Kings were. At this time, there were already a great many people surrounding the chariot. Even if they did not use such a high-grade item like the cloud-piercing shuttle, it would only take 3 to 4 days to come here from Woodfigure Planet. Everyone was lining up to try opening the chest on the chariot, but even Ling Han had only managed to open it after exerting his full effort, so even if big shots like Ran Feiyun had come, they might not be able to successfully open it, either. It was not a matter of power, but rather that the chest itself was too heavy. Whose physique could sustain opening it? If one attempted to open it by force, it would only cause one's fingers to break one after another. If one couldn't do it, then try two. If two still couldn't, then try it with three. But no matter how many people there were, the chest was only so big. How could it allow so many people to lay their hands on it at the same time? But the more they were unable to open it, the more curious everyone was. They were sure that supreme precious treasures were hidden within. Ling Han knew that Gu Daoyi was a divine fetus. Though his physique was not as strong as his own, he could still distribute the force among all his doppelgangers. Thus, Gu Daoyi was definitely able to open this chest. Come quickly. Ling Han sat in a cross-legged position. He had always had great patience. Yet the large black dog was restless. It circled around on its two back legs, its iron underwear reflecting light, and presenting a dazzling sight. However, it did not feel ashamed in the slightest, appearing and disappearing unpredictably, clapping a paw on others' shoulders everywhere it went. Whoever received a clap from it would definitely get so much of a scare that their spirit was about to flee their bodies. This was the despicable king of the 8th campus. Whoever became its target would be very unfortunate. Meanwhile, the large black dog snickered secretly. It was deliberately trying to scare them. After 2 days, the Empress sent him a message from inside the Black Tower. She had already digested the medicinal effects of the saintly medicine, and her present cultivation level had reached the late stage of the low extreme. Her rate of improvement was faster than Ling Han's because she had additionally refined a piece of saintly origin. However, Ling Han felt that the Empress's rate of advancement was still too slow. The best scenario would be if she could immediately advance into the saint level. He did not allow the Empress and the others to appear. This time, he was planning to kill Gu Daoyi with a trap, so the less people appeared, the easier it'd be to avoid making any mistakes. If they were really exposed, he would flee via the cloud-piercing shuttle. In any case, his main motive of being in the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy was for the cultivation resources. He did not lack cultivation techniques. Of course, Ling Han still had a positive opinion of the Tranquil Heart Saint. After all, he had granted him a favor of guidance. Time passed day after another. The chariot and chest attracted the attention of more and more people. Elites swarmed around it, and even such big shots like Ran Feiyun and Qi Tian had also arrived. Not only the 8th campus. The other campuses had also moved out upon hearing the news, and rushed over here. By now, no one cared where the news had come from. With the treasured chest in front of them, what they were the most concerned about was how they could obtain the treasures hidden within. Ling Han, Qi Tian and Kai Miao glared at him at the same time. They had never forgotten him. No matter how much honor Ling Han had gained for the 8th campus, traditions could not be abolished. Ling Han laughed and asked, "You guys want to fight?" Chapter 1518. This new student is so fierce. Enough, this is not the 8th campus. Ren Feiyun stood between them. Don't let others make fun of us. Only then did Qi Tian and Kai Miao humph and let go of their aggression. Though traditions could not be abolished, the reputation of the 8th campus was similarly important. If they burst into an internal conflict in public, then even they would be ashamed. Big shots such as Ran Feiyun and Qi Tian also attempted to open the chest, but they were all unsuccessful. It was not that they didn't have enough power, but rather that their physique still lacked a bit. The second in the world who boasted of having impressive physique was determined to use brute force. In the end, he used too much force and burst a hole into his pants, causing everyone to erupt in laughter. His physique was strong enough, but his power was still a little short, and in the end, he did not succeed. And precisely because he had been close to succeeding, he managed to open the chest slightly. A sacred golden light surged out, causing him to exert more force and try his best. In the end, after he transformed into a barbaric bear, he directly tore his pants. No one laughed at the second in the world. He had already done something that even the big shots did not manage to do. Furthermore, it also allowed the others to see some hope this chest could indeed be opened. Additionally, that light was so sacred and grand. If it was claimed that there were no supreme rare treasures hidden within, no one would believe that. As long as their physique is close to second in the world but stronger, they would definitely be able to open this chest. But this kind of person, does he exist? Everyone shook their heads. There were many people with high cultivation levels here, but there should not be a single person whose physique had reached the level of second in the world. Ling Han, a new student suddenly called out. That's right, there's Ling Han, another new student exclaimed. The seniors might not be aware, but the new students had all personally witnessed the fierce battle between Ling Han and the second in the world. They had crashed into each other a few hundred to over 1,000 times, and in the end, even a wild bull like the second in the world could not help but admit defeat. That was proof that the strength of Ling Han's physique was superior to even the second in the world. But senior brother Ling's cultivation level is more or less the same as that of the second in the world, and the second in the world was not able to open the chest, so most likely, senior brother Ling won't be able to, either. Humph, senior brother Ling has defeated second in the world, so who knows, he may be able to. That's right. Who knows if he can if he hasn't even tried. Everyone went off in search, and soon focused their eyes on Ling Han. Junior brother Ling, come give it a try. A senior beckoned him over. How could Ling Han be willing to? If he opened the box, allowing others to know that it was completely empty inside, would Gu Daoui still come? Humph, and he still calls himself first among the new students. He doesn't even have the courage to try. Someone scoffed. It was unknown whether he was trying to deliberately belittle Ling Han, or trying to spur him into trying out. These words were not pleasant to hear. Ling Han cast one look on that person, and said, if you want to act wretched, no one can control you. But if you bite others madly like a crazy dog, then you are simply asking for a beating. That person did not belong to the 8th campus. Though he was a senior, and usually should not have much conflict with Ling Han, he just happened to dislike Ling Han. He scoffed, this junior brother, you have been very popular recently. His name was Bien Du, and he had entered into the academy 1 million years ago. When he had entered, he ranked 39th, but through these years, the original ranking of the 100 had already changed greatly. Some had died when they had been exploring ancient sites, while others had faced setbacks. Meanwhile, he belonged to those who had improved. His rank had risen up from the 39th place all the way to the 8th. Thus, he also had a very high opinion of himself. Now, even the big shots were not able to open the chest, but there were actually so many people that thought Ling Han was good enough, which made him feel a little jealous. Ling Han had actually avoided being taken down a notch, and had not crawled through the dog's hole, which made him very envious. With these two factors added together, they resulted in him deliberately mocking Ling Han. Ling Han stood up. In any case, Gu Daoui had not arrived yet. He had nothing to do at the moment, so why not pass the time with a fight? Oh, are you envious? Ha ha. Bien Du laughed coldly. My cultivation level is the medium extreme of the Eternal River tier, and in terms of strength, I rank 8th among the new students from the last batch. Is there any need for me to be envious of you? Then why are you blabbering so much? Ling Han waved him off dismissively. Just go somewhere you're actually wanted. You're asking for a beating. Bien Du shot out. In the academy, there was no ban on spars among students. What more here? If it was not for the fact that there were outsiders here, even if he killed him, so what? Those from the 8th campus shook their heads. None of them were optimistic about Bien Du's chances. What a joke. Ling Han had already used strength to prove that no one beneath the consummate level of the Eternal River tier was a match for him. You are only in the medium extreme. Aren't you simply asking to be thrashed? But no one went to remind Bien Du in a conflict between two campuses. They would naturally be helping someone from their own campus. After all, the conflict between senior and junior students was an internal affair, and would be resolved behind closed doors. Ling Han moved. He shot out a punch very casually. Bien Du smirked coldly. You actually dare to look down on me like this? You will be crying later. Sigh. On the side of the 8th campus, there were already a great many people sighing. Don't take it to heart. Ling Han is just a newly enrolled student. Isn't it very normal for him to lose to a senior brother from a previous batch? The people from the other campuses were all saying such things. In their opinion, Wasn't it something very normal for a new student to lose to a senior? We are not sighing for Ling Han, but rather for Bien Du. Someone from the 8th campus snickered. I hope senior brother Bien won't be too seriously wounded. Pooh! Those from the other campuses all spluttered in laughter. What kind of joke was that? There was a whole gap of a minor level between these two people. Even if he was a rank 3 king tier, so what? Bien Du was also a king tier himself. You guys from the 8th campus are really jokers. Bien Du also heard this bit of idle gossip. It had been transmitted through divine sense, so its speed was fast enough. He couldn't help but become furious. His hands formed claws, and grabbed out ruthlessly at Ling Han. He decided to tear off Ling Han's arms by force so everyone would know that the so-called number 1 of the new students was not enough in front of the seniors, especially in front of him. He should be the one who would be the focus of everyone's attention. The punch blasted over, an upright and frontal attack. Bien Du slashed out a claw. He wanted to first sever this arm of Ling Han's. Pang! The fist landed. Bien Du paled. His attack was as frail as a piece of paper in front of the other attack. The punch continued on without any hindrance, directly landing on his chest. How was this possible? Bien Du gasped internally, but his whole person was already sent flying with the force, just like a kite with a broken tail. Seeing this scene, everyone was speechless. Chapter 1519 Gu Dawi arrives. The chest opens. No wonder Ling Han managed to become the troublemaker of the 8th campus. If he himself did not possess strong abilities, it was useless, even with the help of Ran Feiyun. At first, when the rumor spread out, everyone thought that the fact that Ling Han had avoided being taken down a notch was completely due to Ran Feiyun's help. But from the look of things now, Ran Feiyun's contribution couldn't go unnoticed, but Ling Han himself was also extremely powerful. Those from the 8th campus all felt proud. Even the seniors were no exception. In the larger picture, the 8th campus was a family, so their weapons naturally had to be directed at the outsiders. He's too strong. Even Bien Du, a senior who has not taken many years to climb up to the 8th place among the last batch of seniors, has been defeated. I truly do not understand. The great saint actually did not take such a prodigy as his disciple. Hiss, how strong would that Gu Dawi be then? Though the first place of this batch of new students was Ling Han, because it was Gu Dawi who had been taken in by the Star Sand Saint as a personal disciple, it was equivalent to announcing to the whole world that Ling Han was inferior to Gu Dawi. Though everyone had seen Ling Han show his might, as time passed, with the fact that the saint represented the will of the heaven and earth, this concept would have a real impact on the people, especially when one word from the great saint was like a golden rule. Thus, everyone thought that Gu Dawi was stronger. Why had the Star Sand Saint taken Gu Dawi as his disciple so quickly? Wasn't it just to boost Gu Dawi's confidence? He feared that he would not stand back up from his setback. The effects of this were astonishingly good. At least, every student thought that Gu Dawi was stronger than Ling Han at present. Right at this moment, a starship was seen descending from the skies. The starship had not completely stopped when a person leaped down from it. There was divine light glowing all over him, as if he had been born from the heaven and earth, and was the very center of the universe. Gu Dawi, the greatest prodigy of all eternity, an exceptional divine fetus. They were just talking about him, and he was already here. They really were destined enemies. Gu Dawi. Hiss, just how long has it been since his battle with Ling Han? It seems like he has again become considerably stronger. As expected of the greatest prodigy of all eternity. Now, with the personal guidance of the great saint, his abilities would advance at a pace that none of us can imagine. Sigh, this gap would only become bigger and bigger. The new students all shook their heads. At first, they were filled with confidence, and believed that man could conquer nature. After all, they were all king tiers themselves. However, now when they saw Gu Dawi again, a heavy blow was struck against their confidence. There were some people that you really could not help but be impressed with. There were very few that had not lost their confidence. However, they were all king among kings, such as the second in the world, Long Xiangyue, Hong Ma and the others. All of them were focused on Gu Dawi, their fighting spirit blazing in their eyes. Ling Han, on the other hand, kept a low profile. He wanted Gu Dawi himself to realize the extraordinariness of the chariot. Though Gu Dawi was only in the low extreme, he could stand with his arms crossed behind his back. The divine fetus exuded a slight glow, and not even big shots dared to underestimate him. Furthermore, this was the 10th personal disciple of the Star Sand Saint. Who would dare put on airs in front of him? Junior brother Gu. Many people greeted him. It was very possible that he would become the 10th saint under the teachings of the great saint. If they did not quickly form connections with him now, in future, they would no longer be worthy of associating with him. However, there were no big shots among them. People like Ren Feiyun and the others were all incredibly proud. How could they possibly turn around to curry favor with a little junior brother? Gu Dawi completely ignored them. His eyes merely paused a while on Ling Han before he quickly withdrew his gaze. He surveyed this chariot, as well as the corpses of 3 phoenix kings that had wrapped around each other. Slowly, an expression of shock appeared on his face. Who was he? The severing mundane ancestor of the celestial realm, so his insight was naturally excellent. True phoenixes. Furthermore, they were in the Saint King tier. At first, he did not much believe that a celestial king's secret technique would appear in this place. But previously, during the large turmoil, there had indeed been a great many celestial kings that had suffered the tragedy. Otherwise, he wouldn't have obtained a part of the inheritance of the 9 Deaths Heaven art from the ancestral grounds of the 9 Snake tribe himself. This allowed him to form the divine fetus in his 10th life, and also filled him with greed for the heaven arts of the celestial kings. An incomplete cultivation technique was already so awesome. How great would an actual complete heaven art be? This was also why he had to refine Empress Luan Xing. It would greatly make up for the holes in his own 9 Deaths Heaven art. Even if it did not reach a complete level, it would still be innumerable times more powerful than now. He had come with a slight sliver of hope, but when he saw the Phoenix Kings pulling the chariot, it caused his heart to throb madly. Perhaps, maybe, it really was possible. He strode over to the side of the chest, and stretched out his hands to open it. Many people were displeased. They were greeting him, and he completely ignored them. He was really too arrogant. It should be known that he was only in the low extreme of the Eternal River tier. He was not a saint. Gu Dawi was completely indifferent. In truth, he did not even take saints seriously. All the elites in the immortal realm were only trash in his eyes. His hands gripped onto the lid of the chest. With a pull wang, a sudden streak of golden light spread out from inside the chest. It's open. There really is a chance it can be opened. As expected of Gu Dawi, both his cultivation and physique have far surpassed his peers. I can't help but admit I'm impressed. Seeing this scene, everyone felt rueful. Even some big shots nodded involuntarily. They themselves had tried to do so, and their physique was completely inadequate. As expected of a young man that a great saint had an optimistic outlook of. He was indeed shocking. Ka. The chest was slowly opening, and a vein was also popping out on Gu Dawi's forehead. Even if he was a divine fetus, presently, he was still not as strong as he would wish. His arms were trembling, and he was close to collapsing. Let's all work together. A good few big shots rushed forwards, moving respectively to hold up the chest's lid. Previously, the chest had been tightly closed, and they could only exert force through their fingers. The situation was different now. The lid had already been lifted a good few inches, and they were completely capable of holding the lid up with their palms. The difficulty of these 2 tasks were completely different. With everyone working together, especially the big shots, this chest was finally opened slowly. It's open. It's really opened. I wonder what treasures are contained inside. They must be precious treasures. Didn't you see even the big shots were not able to open it? Definitely. Everyone had prepared themselves to fight over the treasure. Before opening the chest, they naturally would be amiable with each other and even work together in collaboration. But once the treasure appeared, there was nothing else left to say. Those that were not qualified to lend a hand previously drew out a treasured spirit tool. It was one matter to open the chest, and competing for its ownership was another. Were there pseudo-saint tools and other such spirit tools just decorations? Wang, the chest was opened. Golden light spread out, directly shooting up into the skies. Immediately, everyone rushed forwards. The treasured chest had opened, and if they were slower than their competitors, nothing would be left. A great battle erupted without any advance notice. That was how unruly they were. "Brat, let go of me. Grandpa Dog is going to go show off his abilities." The large black dog also wanted to join in on the excitement, yet Ling Han had grabbed onto its exposed tail, so it could only claw at empty air. Ling Han shook his head and said, "Don't go." Chapter 1520 Setting Up an Ambush. "Little Black, as expected of the Saint of Deceit, it's no easy feat to trick you," Ling Han said with a smile. "That's right, Tui." The large black dog was just about to grin proudly, but then he immediately turned around to bite at Ling Han. "You actually dare to tease your grandpa dog? Just see if I won't bite a chunk out of your behind." Ling Han clenched his hand into a fist to greet the incoming attack. Pong, pong, pong. The man and dog exchanged a few blows, but their battle ended very soon. One feared the other's sharp teeth, whereas the other was wary of the nine heavens flame. Moreover, they were merely playing around in the first place, so it was naturally impossible that they would really be fighting. Their battle had ended, and so had the others. That was because everyone could see that it was not some kind of treasure that was inside the chest, but rather a scene of chaos. What the hell was this? Yet Gu Daoi's eyes lit up. As one who had once been the severing mundane ancestor, he could completely confirm that this was a doorway, and the inside of the chest was a small world. Treasure trove. The secret technique of a celestial king. He was the first to leap inside. Even though the chest wasn't very big, when one leaped in, their body would continuously shrink in size, and then sink inside. It was very easy to slip through. Everyone exchanged looks, and then they all jumped in one after another. There was a treasure trove inside. Who would be willing to be left behind? Furthermore, Gu Daoi was already leading the way. He wasn't afraid, so who else would be? Ling Han stood up as well. There was no time to lose. He was going to snipe Gu Daoi. He leaped into the world inside the chest, and returned to a familiar place. Gasp! At the entry point to the world inside the chest, everyone let out exclamations of surprise as they stared at that gigantic paw. The three Phoenix Kings were conducting the ultimate inheritance, and merely from the surface, they did not even look like phoenixes. Their aura was not obvious, and one could only vaguely sense the massive power they possessed. But this giant paw was different. With a single look, one could tell that it was incredibly powerful, as if it was a saint king. It was merely a snapped-off paw, and was already so frightening. Then what kind of existence would the true owner of this paw be? This place had to possess a supreme rare treasure. Gu Daoi was the first to move. He raced out, heading towards the main peak. That massive paw seemed like it was a tip. The others followed closely as well. Everyone had the mentality to follow blindly. Though King Tiers were more likely to hold their own opinions. Who was Gu Daoi? The greatest prodigy of all eternity, and even the great saint was fighting to take him as a disciple. This represented the good fortune of the heaven and earth. Gu Daoi's figure suddenly slowed, and he immediately began walking at an incredibly slow pace. N-E. When the others entered into this zone, they all exclaimed in shock. Then, their speed immediately decreased. Some people were wounded by the mountain winds because they had rushed too quickly ahead, and were now covered with injuries. The person who experienced the worst had even had one of his arms sliced off, and was crying out in pain. Only then did everyone finally calm down. They did not dare to rush too quickly ahead. That would completely be seeking death. They were also internally blaming Gu Daoi. You clearly knew how frightening the mountain winds here are, yet why did you not even give a hint? We are from the same academy, after all. Now that they had arrived here, even Gu Daoi was advancing with difficulty in every step. He had to concentrate a large portion of his power on defense. His divine fetus was not strong in terms of strength of physique. He had merely distributed the power he had devoured throughout his whole body, and indirectly increased his defenses. But the situation now was different. When the mountain winds blew over him, half of his body would be affected. Though he was still much more relaxed than the others, he was far from being able to walk ahead easily. Meanwhile, it was the second in the world who was practically like a fish back in the sea. He ran quickly ahead, and was even faster than Gu Dawi. That was because his physique was truly strong. Fuck, what are you running so fast for? Ling Han ascended from the other side of the mountain. It was harder to walk than the normal mountain path. However, he was practically completely unaffected by the mountain winds. Thus, even if the terrain here was a little more difficult to travel, it was fine. He could even fly a small part of the way, but it was still impossible to fly for too long. After all, the paw of a Saint King was pressing down on him. According to Ling Han's plan, he would first enter into the palace at the peak, and then set up an ambush. After Gu Dawi entered, he would attack him and take him down. With that massive paw hindering him, his physique had too much of an advantage. Furthermore, the aura of a Saint King would conceal divine sense, which could allow a sneak attack to become even more powerful. It was not impossible that he could take down Gu Dawi with a single move. As long as he drew him inside the Black Tower, then he too would stay in there for a while, or leave ahead of the others. Naturally, no one would think Gu Dawi's disappearance would be tied to him. Yet the second in the world was actually coming to join in as well. This poor guy, he could only take him down as well. Ling Han quickly sped up, and soon arrived at the summit. Because he had walked another mountain path covered by dense forest, no one discovered his whereabouts. He carefully entered through the hole pierced through by the massive paw, and waited inside the treasure trove. The second in the world soon surpassed Gu Dawi. The two of them engaged in battle, but the second in the world had the advantage in physique, and he was not that much inferior to Gu Dawi in the first place. Thus, he successfully broke through Gu Dawi's blockade, and became the first in the procession. Then, he continued to enlarge his lead. When he arrived at the summit, Gu Dawi had only traveled 3/4 of the path, and the others were even farther behind. None of them had even walked half of the way. The second in the world very quickly discovered the location of the treasure trove. He carefully climbed down. Because he knew that he was the first person, he completely did not think that there would be anyone below him there. Naturally, he completely let down his guard. Ling Han moved, and delivered a palm strike straight at the back of the head of the second in the world. The second in the world immediately roared in fury, but his divine sense had been blocked by the Saint King's aura, and he was no different than a blind and deaf man. Furthermore, he still had to use a portion of his power to defend against the mountain winds. Additionally, Ling Han was actively scheming against he who was unprepared, and his abilities were superior as well, so how was he supposed to block the incoming blow? He was knocked unconscious with Ling Han's palm strike on his head. Even though he had fallen unconscious, there was still an expression of strong humiliation and rage on the second in the world's face. This was natural. He was a king among kings, and yet had actually been knocked unconscious with a single palm strike. This was too embarrassing. Brother, so sorry. Ling Han tossed the second in the world into the Black Tower so that he would not be alerted into regaining consciousness by the commotion created by the great battle between Ling Han and Gu Dawi. Otherwise, Ling Han could only kill him to prevent him from leaking the secret, or would have to imprison the second in the world in the Black Tower for a very long period of time. Ling Han stepped back a bit. The main character was next. After waiting for a long while, the light sound of footsteps was heard. A drawn-out shadow was cast down. Gu Dawi had finally arrived. Without hesitation, he climbed down the hole, but his speed was extremely slow. Chapter 1521 Absolutely crushed. If the person who had launched the sneak attack had been the second in the world, then Gu Dawi would have at most resented the latter for concealing his abilities, causing him to make an error in his calculations, and leading to the fact that he had still sustained minor injury even after he had used the mystical power of 10 lives. But this person was actually Ling Han. How could it be Ling Han? It had clearly only been the second in the world who had walked ahead of him. Could it be? He was suddenly startled. This guy had come up from another place. Gu Dawi's expression changed drastically. Why did he do that? Could it be that he deliberately did not want others to know of his whereabouts? What about the second in the world? You have purposely come to target me? He asked menacingly. Though it was a question, his tone was very certain. Ling Han pointed at him. It is about time to completely clear the debts between the two of us. Are you even worthy to say such words to me? Gu Dawi scoffed. In my first life, I was the severing mundane ancestor of the celestial realm. Who do you think you are? He, too, pointed at Ling Han, his expression filled with condescension. He did not move at the first moment, because he wanted to drag things out. It was too disadvantageous to him to start a fight in this place. Ling Han, on the other hand, would definitely be less affected than he was with a strong physique. Previously, he had already lost once to Ling Han, and now he was seriously weakened, and would definitely be less of a match for Ling Han. It was definitely not a spar this time round. Ling Han was aiming for his life. Even if Gu Dawi was incredibly confident in himself, he still chose a delaying tactic. As long as another person arrived, would Ling Han still dare make a fatal move against him? As long as he managed to get out of this, he could come back to seek his vengeance after cultivating a few more years, or he could ask the Star Sand Saint to make a move. Ling Han had absolute confidence. At the time, he had managed to defeat Gu Dawi with engraving only level 14 killing formations in his body, and now he had inscribed the number 1 killing formation among level 15 formations, the Bloodcrow formation. Even if Gu Dawi's cultivation level had improved rapidly and greatly, it could not be as great as that. He smiled calmly, and did not rush to move either, but rather asked, "How do you know I am not a reincarnated celestial king?" Ho ho! Gu Dawi smirked coldly. Actually, he very much wanted to slap Ling Han, but at this point, he could only suppress the urge. He surveyed his surroundings and said, "I am very curious. If you have deliberately lured me here, but with your abilities, you absolutely are not capable of this. This is the treasure trove of the Heavenly River King." At the time, the Heavenly River King had indeed obtained the inheritance of a celestial king, yet suffered the combined attacks of a great many forbidden lands. In the end he died, but the forbidden lands did not manage to get their hands on this treasure trove, Ling Han explained, appearing to be very generous. Gu Dawi's breathing suddenly became rapid. His eyes had widened slightly, and the gaze he directed at Ling Han was filled with covetous greed. Ling Han nodded and replied, "You have guessed correctly. This treasure is indeed in my possession, and I conveniently used it to draw you out to settle a problem. The cultivation technique of a celestial king." Gu Dawi's body was trembling. Perhaps Ling Han did not know what the word celestial king represented, but he was extremely clear what they meant. The celestial king was the king of the whole celestial realm. The celestial realm was colossal, and there were many elites, but how many celestial kings were there? As far as he knew, there were only a mere 7 off course, even though he had been a severing mundane ancestor. He had still only lived in one corner of the celestial realm. He had not traveled the whole celestial realm, so his knowledge was limited. But were the places that a severing mundane ancestor had traveled to not big enough? And even then, only 7 celestial kings had been born. This was an existence at the top of the power pyramid of the celestial realm. He had only obtained a portion of the 9 Deaths Heaven art, but he was sure that when he returned to the severing mundane tier in the future, there would definitely be no one that could equal him of the same cultivation level, except for those that had similarly cultivated the celestial technique of a celestial king. Only they would be able to match him. Ling Han might possibly have obtained a complete celestial technique of a celestial king. "Give it to me. That is mine." A vein popped on Gu Dawi's forehead, his eyes bloodshot. "Yours your ass." Ling Han moved, grabbing out at Gu Dawi. Gu Dawi naturally was long since prepared. Ice bodies of 9 lives all flew out, while the divine fetus was glowing with supreme light. 2 rays of light shot out from his eyes, filled with a terrifying destructive ability. This was a mystical power that he had newly cultivated, and could only be used after he had reached the Eternal River tier. Previously, he had not fully grasped it, and now he could finally put it to use. "You have improved, so how could I have not?" Gu Dawi called out, his hands forming seals, and shot out another mystical power. It was the Blue Wolf Seal, obtained in his first life in the celestial realm. It was also a mystical power that could barely be used only after reaching the Eternal River tier. Ling Han was unafraid, and aggressively charged onward. Pang! He shot out a punch, and Gu Dawi's 8th lifetime body exploded. Another punch, and the 5th lifetime body also immediately died. He just simply charged forwards, dealing with each body with a single punch. Gu Dawi was astonished. His bodies of 9 lives were stronger even than the present him. So how could they be so fragile? No. How was it that Ling Han had become so extremely powerful? How could this be? How was this possible? It had been only a few years, and with the aid of his various mystical powers, he had made his abilities 3 to 4 times stronger than before. This was already an impressive achievement, but Ling Han's improvement was not just 10 times. It was possible that he had improved 100 times, or even 1,000 times. It was clear that this guy's cultivation level had only increased a single star, yet why was it that his battle prowess had soared so much? Could it be? Your skeleton is actually so strong that you can inscribe 2 high-level formation patterns. Realization suddenly dawned on him. Otherwise, it was definitely impossible that Ling Han could increase his battle prowess by so many folds under the condition that there had been practically no change to his cultivation level. You freak. By now, he was really starting to believe that Ling Han was the reincarnation of a celestial king. Otherwise, how could he possibly be this strong? Ling Han charged ahead. After throwing out 9 punches, all 9 bodies of Gu Dawi had exploded, and he was heading straight for the original. Gu Dawi gritted his teeth. It was an impossible thing for him to flee out of this place. That paw of the Saint King was pressing down on them, so they could only slowly and carefully climb out. But in this kind of situation, could he do that? His only option was to fight to the death, and hold on until another person came. He clapped a hand on his chest, and channeled 3 breaths of celestial source power at the same time. 2 breaths were not enough at all. Pooh! Multiple cracks immediately appeared on his skin, blood seeped out, and he had become a completely bloody figure. Previously, 2 breaths of celestial source power had almost caused him to break down. What more when there were 3 breaths now? But if he did not use 3 breaths, he was unable to match Ling Han at all. This was a move of desperation. I, Gu Dawi, am a supreme divine fetus, and definitely will not lose to anyone in a battle of equals, he roared. It was unknown whether he was merely shouting or trying to give himself encouragement. Ling Han's expression was indifferent. You have merely cultivated an incomplete 9 Deaths Heaven art, whereas I have cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll that has been created through combining the strengths of various secret techniques of celestial kings. In the past, I had not found a way to use the indestructible heaven scroll in attack, but things are different now. Comparing celestial techniques with me? Are you even worthy of it? His palm descended, and the 10 blood crow formations showed their might simultaneously. Now, he was anxious to suppress Gu Dawi, fearing that the latter would explode his body, and his Empress wife would not be able to make use of it in the beginning. He didn't mind if the Empress cultivated at a slower pace, as he also could not bear to have the Empress charge and break through enemy lines, but now, the matter concerned his future days of married bliss. Fuck, you dare destroy what belongs to me, he uttered furiously. At first, Gu Dawi was stunned, but then realization dawned on him, and he almost fainted in fury. You fuck actually thought of me as a meal on a platter. But at this time, Ling Han's palm had already fallen. There was a lifelike blood crow spreading its wings in his palm, exuding an incredibly frightening aura. How was he supposed to block that? Chapter 1522 Who Did It? His palm descended and suppressed all the heavens. Gu Dawi blasted out with his fists, and the power of the divine fetus blossomed. He released an enraged roar, stimulating the power of all the stars of the heavens. A silver river stretched out, and 6 heavenly bodies shone brightly, each of them astonishingly huge. There was a silvery divine light covering him densely. He was going to go all out. But what was the point? Ling Han's palm pressed down, and Gu Dawi was immediately suppressed. He was tossed directly into the Black Tower. In the first place, he was much stronger than Gu Dawi, and added with the fact that this place would restrict Gu Dawi, he easily suppressed the latter with a single move. At this time, those that were nearest to the summit still had about 20% of the journey left to make. Ling Han tossed out the second in the world. On a mischievous whim, he pulled down his pants, and then climbed out of the treasure trove. He took the same path and returned to the foot of the mountain. Brat, what did you go off to do? The large black dog stood in his path. Looking at the despicable grin on your face, It definitely must be nothing good. I went to destroy your doghouse. Ling Han was in a good mood, and countered all the moves from the large black dog. The large black dog looked at him suspiciously and said, I say, little Han, this is not good of you. How could you not call Grandpa Dog if you were doing something fun like murder and arson? You see, Grandpa Dog can still keep a lookout for you from the sidelines. Ling Han chuckled coldly. You're just here to watch the excitement, aren't you? If someone had really come, you definitely would have added fuel to the fire. An absolutely cunning dog that delights in having the world in chaos. Hee hee, you actually hit the nail on the head. I am speechless. The large black dog knew no shame. I can't be bothered with you. Ling Han ascended the mountain, whistling lazily. Gu Dawi that had entered into the Black Tower would be completely helpless, and his only option would be to surrender to his fate. Ling Han, what is this place? How could there possibly be such a huge spatial god tool? Who exactly are you? Gu Dawi shouted with all his might inside the Black Tower. His celestial source power was already suppressed by the Black Tower, and he could only stand helplessly now, unable to move even the slightest bit. What are you shouting so much for? Do you think this is a place for you to shout as you like? The Azura Demon Emperor appeared. He had always been one to take advantage of those weaker while revering those stronger. By now, Gu Dawi had lost all power to resist, so he naturally wanted to use his superior position to intimidate him. Gu Dawi was about to go crazy. A mere sun-moon tear actually dared to rebuke him. Was he trying to cause an uprising? Pah! The Azura Demon Emperor immediately threw a slap at him, and fiercely said, What expression of yours is that? What kind of eyes are you looking at me with? Are you looking down on your grandpa Azura? Fuck you, you actually dare oppose my master when you look so weak. You're simply asking for a thrashing. He did not say another word, and simply settled for beating him up first. Ling Han, you have gone too far. You can kill me, but cannot humiliate me. You actually let your lackey humiliate me. You are too shameless. Gu Dawi was about to go crazy. He was the honored severing mundane ancestor here. Lackey. The Azura Demon Emperor wore an expression of pride. Brat, being able to become master's lackey is a wonderful thing that cannot be attained even if you beg. Do you think just anyone can become master's lackey? Che, my master would not even deign to look at a piece of trash like you. His whole expression was filled with flattery. Master is our sun, and would bring light wherever he shines. Master is the light of guidance that lights up the darkness. Master is the strongest elite that stands at the absolute apex, and everyone in the world can only look up to him with reverence and admiration. Gu Dawi's whole face was twitching. This was the first time he had seen someone curry favor with someone to such a refreshing and refined extent, and he was already dumbfounded. Ling Han grinned internally, and blocked off his connection with the Black Tower. From the instant that he tossed Gu Dawi into the Black Tower, this person had already become a thing of the past, and was not worth another glance from him. Gu Dawi's being known as the greatest prodigy of all eternity was only because he had cultivated the incomplete secret technique of a celestial king. When Ling Han reached the summit, only 31 people had actually arrived. They were all searching around in the treasure trove, but after Ling Han had swept through, that would be equivalent to a plague of locusts having swept through. Would there be anything of the slightest value left behind? The second in the world was sitting on the ground, a stunned expression on his face. His wide fingers were gripping into his hair. A lapse had occurred in his memories. Why was I lying on the ground just now? Oh right, I have been knocked unconscious. Nothing has been taken from me, but my pants have been taken off. Gasp. The second in the world involuntarily pressed his hand on his behind. Could it be that this was a sexual assault? At first, he had not thought anything of it, but with a clench of his heart, he could vaguely feel his behind aching, and he paled in shock. It couldn't have been that he had been raped, right? His eyes swept over the masses. Everyone presently here was a suspect. It just so happened that Ling Han had just climbed up. When he saw the stunned and horrified expression on the second in the world's face, he couldn't help but laugh internally, and asked, Brother Second, what is it? You don't look too good? Who asked you to have run so fast? The second in the world merely nodded distractedly at Ling Han. His eyes were wide open, and swept over every single one of the 31 people here. There was Ran Feiyun, there was Qi Tian, and there were also the other big shots. Fuck, there were too many people, and he could not identify who it was. Pooh! Ling Han spluttered. When the large black dog saw this, he immediately stood on his hind legs, and said, "Brat, does this have anything to do with you? Judging from the look of that bear, he looks like he has been raped, so could it be?" Gasp. The large black dog was scared into taking a few steps back. "I never thought that you are that kind of person. Grandpa Dog is warning you, if you dare have any ideas about me, I will tear a chunk off of your behind." Ling Han did not pay him any attention. It had only been a mischievous whim of his that caused him to play a trick on the second in the world. He had never thought that the effects would be so awesome that the second in the world would be so alarmed, and search everywhere for whoever raped him. After a thorough search, it was natural that everyone did not gain anything. They defiantly searched again. Would there be something like a treasure trove hidden within the treasure trove? They wanted nothing more than to flatten the whole mountain and search deep underground. But there was still nothing valuable to be found. No one cared about why Gu Dawi had disappeared. Previously, when they had entered, everyone was ****** looking for treasure. So who would be concerned that there was one less person? Gu Dawi might have seen that there was nothing to be gained, and had thus long since left. Everyone left begrudgingly, but the moment they exited the world of the chest, they saw a golden pathway spread out from an endless distance away. Then they saw a person walk towards them. He was clearly merely strolling slowly, but in the blink of an eye, he had already arrived in front of them. The torrential rain saint. When they saw him, they all exclaimed in shock. Some of them immediately knelt, and those that did not kneel still looked extremely respectful. Saints stood at the apex of cultivation, and would be respected universally. The torrential rain saint raised his head slightly. He looked at the 3 corpses of the Phoenix Kings, and an involuntary expression of surprise appeared on his face. A treasure had appeared in this place, and the news had definitely also reached his ears. However, he was not tempted. When one had reached the height that he had already blended to a certain extent with heaven's will. If this was capable of bringing him gains or harm, he would definitely be prompted by a sudden impulse and have sensed it. Because he had not sensed anything at all, he naturally did not move out. The other saints were the same as well. However, when the chest had been opened, golden light surged into the skies, and it could be seen even from the distant wood-figure planet. This caused the 10 saints to feel slightly curious. Thus, he came to take a look. He was sure that no matter what happened, he would be able to easily deal with it. Yet when he saw the 3 corpses of the Phoenix Kings, he was stunned. How was he supposed to deal with this? Chapter 15:23 10 Saints all arrive. All of you stay here, do not move without permission, the torrential rain saint commanded darkly. We obey, everyone answered solemnly. The torrential rain saint stepped once more on the golden path, and returned to Wood-Figure Planet. However, though saints could rip a tear into space, they could not do so to the extent that the other end of the world seemed very close. A certain amount of time was still required. After about an hour later, the 10 saints were seen coming together, arriving on multiple golden paths. When everyone saw this, they were all unfathomably stunned. It had actually alerted the 10 saints. These were the 10 saints. The Star Sand Saint walked towards the Phoenix King's corpses, causing Ling Han to feel slightly anxious. His wife, Fenger, was inside, accepting her inheritance, and she could absolutely not be interrupted. He decided internally that if the Star Sand Saint really would do something, he would stop him even if it meant he had to use the blood essence of the Saint King. Thankfully, the Star Sand Saint soon stopped, and showed a hint of seriousness in his expression. He had absolutely zero confidence that he could suppress these 3 corpses, even if these 3 Phoenix Kings were already dead, and even if he was an honored and noble great saint. Master! The 9 saints all approached. The Star Sand Saint's expression was filled with seriousness, and he stated, "These are the bodies of Saint Kings." Hiss! All the 9 saints inhaled sharply. With their insight, they naturally could tell that those were not monsters that had never been seen before, but rather 3 true phoenixes that were presently wrapped around one another. True phoenixes definitely were of saint level, but to have reached Saint King level, it was hard to imagine. The 3 phoenix kings were pulling a chariot, so how valuable could the treasure they were bearing be? The bitter tea saint said. The 10 saints exchanged looks. If they could obtain the treasures left behind by a saint king, then small saints could possibly become medium saints, and a great saint would have hopes of advancing another step further and attain a supreme apex. Let's go and take a look. The chest had been left open, and they naturally could see the scene of chaos that lay within. They also heard from the mouths of the students that there was indeed a small world inside. The saints entered, and even if the others had already entered once before, they involuntarily followed and entered again. To have alerted even the saints, the importance of this object was beyond their expectations. They had not found any treasures, but who knew, maybe the saints could. When Ling Han entered into the world inside the chest as well, he saw that the 10 saints had already arrived at the summit of the main peak. Obviously, the intimidation of the massive paw had no effect on these saints, or rather it was too far, and so posed no threat at all. The Star Sand Saint moved, and began to put away this massive paw. Though a great saint was far from the level of a saint king, this was after all only a paw, and not a complete corpse. Furthermore, the 3 phoenix kings outside were already wrapped around each other, and their bloodline connected, so how could a broken paw compare? The Star Sand Saint used all his might, and dispelled the terrifying saintly might within the paw. The others could clearly sense that the destructive ability of the mountain winds on the main peak was being weakened at an incredibly fast pace. Take in! The Star Sand Saint shouted again, and this massive paw disappeared. Ling Han couldn't help but feel envious. This was the paw of a saint king here. If he could cook it into a stew, there would definitely be innumerable benefits to be gained. But who would dare take something from the possession of a great saint? Once the giant paw vanished, there was naturally not the slightest bit of threat left here. Everyone set out on a massive sweep. Even the 10 saints were turning over mountains and seas, yet there was not the slightest bit to obtain. Actually, it could not be said that there was nothing. The Saint King's paw itself was an astonishing treasure, and refining the saintly origin power from within could possibly be beneficial even for the great saint. Where is Gu Dawi? The Star Sand Saint suddenly paused. This last disciple of his had come here early on. At first, he thought that he would be in the world inside the chest, but he did not sense Gu Dawi at all. Where was he? Where had he gone? The 9 saints all hurriedly spread out their divine sense in search. Gu Dawi was their master's personal disciple, and also bore the high hopes of their master. In the future, he would be inheriting his legacy. But no matter how much they searched, they did not discover the slightest trace of Gu Dawi. The Star Sand Saint's expression was dark, and he had those who had come in earliest all relate their experience. When the second in the world related his own experiences, the Star Sand Saint's expression involuntarily moved slightly. Suddenly, a frightening gust of wind began to blow around the peaks, its might not the slightest bit inferior to the mountain winds that had been created by the effects of massive paw previously. The Star Sand Saint was certain that the mysterious person that had knocked the second in the world unconscious was connected to the disappearance of his disciple. It was not that he had not suspected the second in the world, but he definitely did not think that the second in the world had the ability to take Gu Dawi down under the condition of not alerting the other 7 in that previously unusual situation. If a supreme divine fetus was this weak, how could he have possibly taken him in as a personal disciple? This person. Who exactly was it? All the big shots among the students had that kind of ability, but everyone had said that Gu Dawi was the second to enter into this place. If there was anyone faster than him, that would definitely be one that was extremely strong in physique. There was not one person among the big shots that fitted this condition. In terms of physique, it was Gu Dawi who was superior instead. The Star Sand Saint cast his eyes on Ling Han. Though this was only a new student, he had managed to defeat Gu Dawi previously. Furthermore, his physique was astonishing, so he possessed an incredible advantage in this place. Ling Han. The great saint suddenly spoke up in direct confrontation, his voice sounding like thunder. Was it you who apprehended Gu Dawi? Ling Han gave an ah, his face filled with confusion. He looked absolutely baffled. When the large black dog saw this, he couldn't help but give him a thumbs up internally. He really had the elegant demeanor of Grandpa Dog. When the news about Gu Daoi's disappearance spread out, he did not even have to think a second time. He was immediately certain that it was Ling Han who was behind it. You quietly ascended the mountain, then quietly descended again. Then you climbed up using a different path. Didn't this obviously show that you have done something secretly before? Little guy, you still want to play tricks in front of your Grandpa Dog? You're still too naive. The Star Sand Saint's abilities were millions of times greater than the large black dog's, but in terms of familiarity with Ling Han, he was far from being able to compare to the large black dog. In his eyes, Ling Han's expression of complete confusion and lack of understanding definitely did not look like it was an act. Was this unrelated to him? The Star Sand Saint pondered. But aside from Ling Han, whose physique would be so strong that he could reach the summit ahead of the second in the world and Gu Daoi, it can't possibly be Ling Han. The second in the world was very loyal. He explained that Ling Han had appeared at a time that was far later than the others. But when the Star Sand Saint heard this, a hint of suspicion was seen in his expression. With Ling Han's physique, not being the first to reach the summit was one thing, yet he was actually later than a great many others? This was illogical. Ling Han internally berated the second in the world for ruining things. If you don't say anything, no one will take you as a mute. If he had known this would happen, he should have tossed him into the Black Tower and imprisoned him for 8 to 10 years. The Star Sand Saint looked at Ling Han and calmly asked, with your physique being so strong, why did you appear so late? Ling Han's heartbeat was even, and he responded, in reply to the saint, I went to the other peaks prior to this, and so went here at a later time. The Star Sand Saint hummed. This indeed was a very good reason, but should he really believe it? He released his divine sense and searched Ling Han thoroughly. After a while he commanded, take out the spatial spirit tool that you possess. Yes. Ling Han drew out a ring, and respectfully handed it over. Thankfully, he had long made his own preparations. This ring was used to cover for the Black Tower. Elites like them would definitely possess spatial spirit tools, right? The Star Sand Saint grabbed out at empty air, and retrieved the ring. Then his divine sense swept over it. There were some true origin stones inside, as well as some alchemical pills and herbs, but there was definitely no dead body, nor any trace of a corpse. Was it really not this boy? Chapter 1524 New 9 Deaths Heaven AR. The Star Sand Saint threw the ring back to Ling Han. With his command, everyone left the world within the chest. Send someone to stand guard here. The 3 Phoenix King corpses seem to be undergoing some kind of change. The moment there is any activity, immediately send someone to inform me, the Star Sand Saint commanded. Yes. The 9 saints all affirmed their adherence to his command loudly. The 10 saints stretched out their golden paths, and had already returned to Wood Figure Planet. Naturally, there was someone staying behind to stand guard here, taking note and observing any change to the 3 Phoenix King corpses. Even the saints had left, so there was naturally no reason for the others to stay behind any longer. They all made their way back. Though everyone had not managed to gain anything, it was not a wasted trip. They had seen the remains of Saint Kings. Wasn't that a valuable experience in itself? Meanwhile, Ling Han did not leave. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was a massive weakness by now. When she had completely accepted her inheritance, he would move at the first instant and knock unconscious everyone here. Then, he would take her from here before the saints arrived. He made a long detour, then directly entered into the Black Tower, and waited patiently. And in the outside world, or to be more exact, in the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy, a huge matter happened. Gu Daoi had disappeared. The Star Sand Saint flew into a thunderous rage. He even sent out the 9 saints to search for the whereabouts of Gu Daoi. He had mysteriously vanished when he journeyed out of Wood Figure Planet. This was something that the great saint could not accept. If he was still alive, he had to be found. If he was dead, then he wanted to see his dead body for himself. Yet when the news of this spread out, it was incredibly encouraging news to the other students. If Gu Daoi had died, didn't that mean that he was not the fated person, and the others still had hope of becoming a saint? Indeed, just like Ling Han said, effort might not necessarily lead to success, but no effort meant absolute failure. They had stayed behind in the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy. If they managed to gain the favor of the Star Sand Saint, that would mean that they could replace Gu Daoyi and become a new candidate for a saint. These people naturally wanted nothing more than for Gu Daoyi to have died. Only those like Long Xiangyuan the second in the world had firm belief in themselves. They believed that they were inferior to none. Aside from the 3 Phoenix King corpses that were still there, everything seemed to have returned to normal. Gu Daoyi had not been found in the end, but the Star Sand Saint did not take any new disciple, either. Then, a more explosive piece of news spread out. The Star Sand Saint had the intention to nurture his own son to inherit the position of saint from him. At first, this was practically an impossible thing. Though saints had exceptional ways, they would be able to pull others into the eternal river tier at most. They had no way to increase the cultivation level of others further than that. The barrier into saint level had to be breached with one's own effort. But when the Star Sand Saint had taken that paw of the Saint King, he gained that slight sliver of a chance. He had extracted a drop of blood essence from a Saint King from within it, dispelled the murderous aura inside, used it to reforge his son's body, and increased his martial arts natural talent from the very source. The blood essence of a Saint King was too precious and too powerful. Since he could nurture his own son, what was the point of letting his own fertile water flow into the fields of others? In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. Inside the Black Tower, the Empress ended her isolation, and smilingly stood in front of Ling Han. Finished? Ling Han asked in pleasant surprise. The Empress in front of him did not seem to have advanced much in her cultivation level, but the feeling she gave off was different. She seemed to have an additional otherworldly air of divinity. She was even more charming than before, and had also become stronger many times over. The Empress smiled beautifully, and replied, "I have already cultivated the divine fetus, and obtained the mystical power of 10 lives. I have also improved further." Her figure swayed slightly, and a person walked out from within her body. This new person looked exactly like her, but her bearing was slightly different. However, she was still very strong. Consecutively, it was a second person, a third, and there were 9 in all. Added with herself, there were 10 of them in total. Ling Han was a little dumbfounded. He had 10 Empress wives? One was enough to completely captivate him out of his wits. How was he supposed to handle 10 of them? Gu Daoyi could only summon his bodies of 9 lives, and I previously could also only form 9 doppelgangers, and their abilities would still be weakened. Empress Luan Xing was slightly excited. But now, every one of my doppelgangers is as strong as I am. Furthermore, no matter how far my doppelgangers are from me, they are connected with my will, and communication between us will not be affected by time and space. If a doppelganger dies, I will still be able to reform it. What is more amazing is that the 10 of us can cultivate at the same time, and the abilities of the doppelgangers will flow into the main body, and their battle prowess will only be affected by the main body. Ling Han experienced a huge shock. This was truly extremely impressive. As expected of the technique of a celestial king. Previously, whether it was the Empress or Gu Daoyi, they had only cultivated a superficial part, and now the Empress had truly grasped some profound secrets of a celestial king technique. This definitely was not the true 9 Deaths Heaven art, either. Still, it was already very powerful. Unless the Empress herself pointed it out, Ling Han had completely no way to distinguish which was her main body, and as long as the main body was not dead, the doppelgangers could grow and multiply without end. In battle, this was really too powerful. Furthermore, the 10 of them could cultivate at the same time, and all their gains would be supplied to the main body, which was equivalent to being 10 times faster than others. More importantly, when others ingested alchemical pills, they would slowly become immune or even accumulate alchemic poison. But the Empress could use her 10 bodies to ingest them in turns. After a whole round, the alchemic poison and immunity would have more or less disappeared. How could a celestial king technique not be awesome? Ling Han leaped up and embraced the Empress. Whirling her around a few times, he asked, "Then you wouldn't need too much time to enter into saint level, right?" The Empress smiled confidently. "Within 100 years. Ling Han chuckled. "That was only 100 years. I will bear it." Because the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was still undergoing her inheritance, they continued to stay inside the Black Tower. Everyone had previously drank a soup of saintly medicine, and by now, the medicinal effects had been more or less digested. Thus, Ling Han drew out a second saintly medicine, and began to cook again. This time, the Empress had devoured a large portion of the saintly medicine because she had 10 bodies to help her with the digestion, which was not the slightest bit inferior to Ling Han. A number of days later, Ling Han just barely reached the late stage of the low extreme, and the Empress had advanced into the peak stage of the low extreme. She was merely one step away from breaking through. Her current cultivation rate was really too fast. With 10 of her cultivating at the same time and ingesting alchemical pills together, added with the fact that she was a divine fetus as well, even Ling Han could only watch her with shock from behind, completely dumbfounded. Ling Han was naturally not going to feel envious. He wanted nothing more than for the Empress to advance her cultivation rate even faster. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was still the same, so Ling Han returned to Wood Figure Planet to seek out Lin Yuqi. Of course, the Empress also left behind one of her doppelgangers to stand guard. If anything unusual happened, she could find out at the first instant, and rush back with Ling Han. Though a saint's speed was faster, the person that had to inform the saint had to make a trip to Wood Figure Planet first. Ling Han only had to be faster than this person who was bringing the information back. Obviously, this was not a hard thing to do. The Treasure Forest Pavilion had opened a branch here, but this was not the Long Light Galaxy. The Treasure Forest Pavilion did not have the slightest advantage in this place. Their doors were desolate, and looked as if they were about to close down very soon. Ling Han entered and exclaimed, "Where is your shopkeeper? There's big business to be done." He slightly released the aura of an eternal river tear, and those shop assistants immediately became incomparably respectful. They hurriedly requested him to wait for a while as they raced to the backyard to inform the shopkeeper. Soon after, with a tinkle and an air of fragrance, a beautiful woman approached him with graceful steps and a seductive swing of her hips. She exuded a bewitching air from her very bones, and the eyes of the younger shop assistants blazed with fire at the sight of her. Chapter 1525 Rex. Some women were noble in their beauty, while others were aloof in their beauty. There were also some that were incredibly seductive in their beauty. It was clear that Lin Yuqi belonged to the last of these categories. Her beauty was no match for that of the Empress, but she was definitely the type of beauty who would cause men to want to take off their pants at first sight. "Oh, isn't this little brother Han?" Lin Yuqi's habit of teasing others hadn't changed a single bit. A seductive glimmer instantly appeared in her eyes upon seeing Ling Han, and she was already starting to act flirtingly. The Empress smiled faintly, her majestic gaze immediately sweeping over. Sister. Like a mouse that had seen a cat, Lin Yuqi instantly became obedient. In fact, she even lowered her head and started fiddling with the corner of her sleeves. The domineering nature of this Empress was still fresh in her mind, and thus she didn't dare to act out of line at all. Ling Han smiled and said, "It seems like business hasn't been good lately." "Sigh, don't mention it. It's much worse than just not good. In fact, our shop has been completely deserted." There was a troubled look on Lin Yuqi's face, and she said in exaggeration, "I'm so poor right now that I almost have to sell my body for a living." If the Empress hadn't been present, she would have definitely made eyes at Ling Han already. She would then ask if he was interested in becoming her sugar daddy. Now, however, she could only bite her tongue. This made her feel slightly stifled. A leopard couldn't change its spots. Even if she forced herself, she still couldn't act seriously. "Then let me introduce you to a business," Ling Han said. Lin Yuqi looked at him with a suspicious expression before asking, "You really want to introduce me to a brothel?" "Fuck!" Ling Han shook his head before retrieving some godly metal, and saying, "I want you to help me sell this godly metal. Moreover, I also want to buy some low-level godly metal myself. I'm happy with anything from level 11 to level 13. He had far too much level 14 godly metal, and thus he could sell the majority of it and use what he earned to purchase level 11 to level 13 godly metal. This godly metal could then be used to level up his divine demon sword. Gasp! Level 14 godly metal. Lin Yuqi dashed over and essentially snatched the godly metal from Ling Han's hands. "Oh my word! How many people did you rob?" You actually managed to obtain this much high-level godly metal? It's just that it's a little strange. This godly metal seems to look like... There was a suspicion in her mind, yet she didn't dare to believe it. Ling Han couldn't help but smile and say, "Look like tiles?" Indeed. He had removed these pieces of godly metal from those stairs. They didn't just look like tiles, but were legitimately tiles. Lin Yuqi nodded in reply. However, she merely thought that Ling Han was joking. This was level 14 godly metal. Who would use it as simple floor tiles? How extravagant would one need to be? With a strange expression she asked, "This is a pharmacy, yet you want me to sell godly metal? Can you not?" Ling Han asked. Lin Yuqi mulled over this for a moment. This was level 14 godly metal, so there were definitely few customers who could afford it. However, it could definitely attract many visitors who wanted to lay their eyes on it. That being the case, wouldn't her pharmacy become bustling with people? She immediately nodded and said, "I can." She then made eyes at him and said, "You've helped me so much. Perhaps you want me to repay you with my body?" Ling Han ignored her, saying, "I don't want even a single true origin stone. All I want you to do is exchange it for level 11 to level 13 godly metal. Also take this ring. There's more godly metal inside here. I'm fairly sure that it's enough to purchase the godly metal that I want." Ling Han handed her a spatial ring. Lin Yuqi was astonished. Just the few slabs of level 14 godly metal that he had handed her were already indescribably expensive. Yet he actually had more? She used her divine sense to inspect the spatial ring, and she almost fainted because of what she saw. Good heavens! There's a small mountain of godly metal inside. Although she hadn't inspected each piece carefully, she could say with absolute certainty that they were all high-level godly metal. "Aren't you afraid of me stealing them?" As if reading her thoughts, Ling Han immediately unleashed his aura. Eternal River Tear. Lin Yuqi was astounded. Just then, she hadn't been able to detect Ling Han's cultivation level. However, if Ling Han actively unleashed his aura, she would easily be able to determine his cultivation level. After all, the Treasure Forest Pavilion also had many elites at the Eternal River Tier. However, how many years had it been? Yet, Ling Han had already advanced from the Sun Moon Tier to the Eternal River Tier. This was simply unfathomable. At this rate, wouldn't he advance to become a saint soon? Who dared to steal a saint's belongings? Lin Yuqi had indeed thought about taking the godly metal and fleeing back to Cloud Apex Planet. However, this thought had only lingered in her mind for a split second. What a joke! How could she offend such a freak? Ling Han waved his hand and said, "I'll return in a few years." He then wrapped his arm around Empress Luan Xing's waist and took his leave. This brat is truly going to defy the heavens. Lin Yuqi shook her head and remarked, "Perhaps he'll already be a saint the next time that we meet." Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing quickly arrived back where the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was. How could Ling Han leave his beautiful wife alone for too long? In any case, there was no better place to cultivate than the Black Tower, no? Moreover, Ding Ping and Jiu Yao could simply return to the academy from time to collect their cultivation resources and also gather some information. Time flew by, and it wasn't long before 9 years had already passed. One day, scorching flames suddenly burst from the corpses of the 3 Phoenix Kings. It was as if they were going to rise from the ashes and obtain a new life. Ling Han immediately rushed over upon detecting this, yet a small starship had already soared into the sky and started flying toward Woodfigure Planet. Ling Han pondered for a moment and decided to ignore this starship. Instead, he channeled a cultivation technique that changed his physique as well as his appearance. He then charged toward the group of cultivators that were still guarding this area. Those who remained as guards here naturally wouldn't be powerful elites. Thus, they were all knocked unconscious by Ling Han before they even had time to react. If a saint wanted to come here from Woodfigure Planet, they would be able to do so in just a short moment. However, that starship would need at least 3 days to arrive at Woodfigure Planet. Thus, Ling Han still had 3 days to act. He gazed at the corpses of the 3 Phoenix Kings, and determined that they were most likely consuming the very last of their power. Their corpses had become transparent, and he could see the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's seemingly weightless body among them. Her body was curled into a ball, with her arms wrapped around her knees. Meanwhile, her silky hair was seemingly soaring toward the sky. "Wife, you've got to hurry up," Ling Han murmured. "Otherwise, we'll have no option but to flee from this galaxy if we're discovered by some saint." If a saint witnessed her current state, they would be able to easily link her to the treasures of this place. Moreover, her relationship with Ling Han was no secret. Thus, all of them would be indicted along with her. 2 days passed, and the flames of the Phoenix Kings also burned to an extreme before suddenly dying down. However, a new burst of flame immediately replaced it as the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden proudly rose into the sky. A pair of wings that measured tens of thousands of meters in length was unfurled behind her. The wingspan was unchanged, yet the divine patterns that decorated the wings were numerous times more complex than before. This wasn't an elevation in cultivation level, but rather an elevation in essence and quality. This was analogous to the Star Sand Saint using a drop of his Saint King blood essence to elevate the natural talent and physique of his son. The heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had also undergone a similar transformation, though the benefits that she had received were countless times more impressive than what the Star Sand Saint's son had received. After all, the Star Sand Saint hadn't even dared to touch the corpses of the 3 Phoenix Kings. "Wife!" Ling Han shouted. The heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden immediately opened her eyes before flapping her wings and flying into Ling Han's embrace. She wore a look of excitement as she retracted her wings. This was only natural as she hadn't seen Ling Han in many years. "Let's go," Ling Han said as he retrieved the cloud-piercing shuttle. They all jumped aboard, and the cloud-piercing shuttle immediately soared into the sky. After taking some detours, they started to return to Wood Figure Planet from a completely different direction. It was also at this moment that a thick golden path unfurled from Wood Figure Planet. This was the sign of a saint traveling over. Chapter 1526 New Shopkeeper. The saint that had set off was the Dipankara saint. He arrived in no time, and he quickly returned with the guards who had been knocked unconscious. However, these guards were unable to recall whom they were knocked unconscious by, regardless of how hard they racked their brains. The Star Sand Saint was furious upon learning of this. The mysterious culprit was most likely the same person who was responsible for Gu Daoi's disappearance. Yet, they had actually dared to lay a trap there. How incredibly audacious! This was a direct provocation to his might. However, what did it matter that he was furious? There were no clues for him to chase, so what more could he do? Ling Han safely returned to the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy. He then headed to the Treasure Forest Pavilion to check how much godly metal Lin Yuqi had obtained for him. However, Ling Han was given a fright when he arrived before the pharmacy. It was bustling with people. The last time he had come, it had been desolate and quiet. Now, however, there was an endless stream of people entering and leaving the pharmacy. It was as if they wanted to burst the pharmacy apart. "Brother Qian, are you for real? I want to forge a treasured saber. So why are you taking me to a pharmacy?" "Hee, you'll know once we go inside." 2 people in front of Ling Han were about to head into the pharmacy. However, one of them was wearing a confused expression as they looked at the sign of the Treasure Forest Pavilion. A pharmacy selling weapons? How strange. Ling Han entered the pharmacy behind the 2 people. Upon entering, he discovered that only a small portion of people was actually purchasing medicines. Most people were gazing around as if waiting for something to happen. It wasn't long before a maid in an azure dress appeared, a tray in her hand. There was an item on this tray, yet it was hidden by a red cloth. "Let us begin the auction for today's godly metal." The maid removed the red cloth, revealing the dazzling piece of metal that rested beneath it. Gasp! This is a level 14 godly metal, the ghost-patterned gold. It can be forged into a level 14 weapon, and after being nurtured for a long time, it can become a level 14 god tool. Its power is on par with elites at the medium extreme of the Eternal River tier. I've always heard that this pharmacy auctions a piece of high-level godly metal every 3 days. I hadn't believed it before, but I have no option but to believe it now. This is truly astonishing. Indeed, a pharmacy is actually selling godly metal. How strange is this? Aren't they stealing business from actual weapons shops? Everyone was engaged in a spirited discussion. However, they would still place a bid if they thought the price was right. After all, what did it matter where they purchased their godly metal from? Everything would be fine as long as the godly metal was real. Bids were placed one after another, and the piece of level 14 godly metal was eventually sold to a very happy customer. The customer excitedly handed over his payment before immediately stowing the godly metal away. He then sprinted away from the pharmacy, afraid that he would be ambushed and robbed. Although the auction had already concluded, many people still lingered around. They had come here anyway, so they might as well purchase some goods. Even if only 1% of the people purchased goods, this would still be a huge amount of transactions. After all, there were far too many people here. Ling Han nodded upon seeing this. He then approached a worker and said, "Where's the shopkeeper? I have some matters to discuss with them." "Who are you? Do you think any random person can meet our shopkeeper?" The worker was unexpectedly arrogant, and his attitude was the complete opposite of what Ling Han had experienced the previous time he had come here. Moreover, the workers here were all different from before. Ling Han didn't recognize a single one of them. Business was booming right now, so Ling Han could understand the overconfidence of these workers. However, their arrogance and haughty attitude were taking things a step too far. Ling Han's expression became cold, and wisps of heavens might started to emanate from his body. The worker almost wet his pants in fright. "Don't make me repeat myself again. Call your shopkeeper over." The worker hurriedly nodded and replied, "Yes, yes, right away." His entire body was trembling. After waiting for a moment, Ling Han saw the worker reappear. "Sir, I'm extremely sorry. The shopkeeper is busy at the moment, so he has no time to entertain guests." Ling Han's gaze became intense, and it was as if he were about to explode with fury. However, he forcefully suppressed his anger and said, "Tell him that Ling Han has come." The worker hesitated for a moment. He had been told to ignore this customer and directly shoo them out of the pharmacy. However, the question was, did he dare to shoo this customer away? Moreover, did he have the ability to shoo this customer away? Thus, he had no option but to turn around and report to the shopkeeper again. He returned after a moment saying, "Mr. Ling, the shopkeeper has invited you for a discussion." He led Ling Han to the backyard of the pharmacy. There was indeed a person standing in the backyard, but this person wasn't Lin Yuqi. Instead, it was a middle-aged man. He looked like a large mountain, and there was a powerful aura radiating from his body. He was at the medium extreme of the eternal river tier. "Where's Lin Yuqi?" Ling Han knew that something wasn't right, and he asked, "Where's Lin Yuqi?" The middle-aged man waved the worker away before calmly saying, "I'm sure Gangyang, the new shopkeeper of this pharmacy." Ling Han frowned and said, "I handed Lin Yuqi a large amount of godly metal to help sell for me." Ahem. Sure Gangyang coughed loudly, and said, "Lin Yuqi has already been transferred back to the headquarters. I don't know what kind of deal you made with her, and I can't take your word for it, either." Fuck. He's trying to renege on the deal. This person actually dares to steal my belongings. How courageous. Ling Han humphed and said, "Are you trying to openly steal my belongings?" Sure Gangyang's expression instantly darkened. "Young man, your ability to enter the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy is a reflection of your cultivation talent. However, having talent is one matter, and having trust is another matter. One has to abide by the principle of trust when dealing with others. Yet, you actually dare to falsely accuse the Treasure Forest Pavilion? How audacious!" He was aware that Ling Han was at the Eternal River tier. However, he was still completely unafraid. After all, just how powerful was the Treasure Forest Pavilion? They also had numerous Eternal River tier elites. Moreover, he was an elite at the medium extreme of the Eternal River tier, while Ling Han was only at the low extreme. As such, could he not suppress Ling Han? Ling Han tapped his fingers and said, "I'll give you two options. 1. Allow Lin Yuqi to speak with me. 2. I'll beat you until you become obedient, and then we can discuss this again." Ha 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 ha. Sure Gangyang roared with laughter upon hearing this. "Young man, you're far too arrogant." He knew who Ling Han was. Back then, He had even helped Lin Yuqi's branch family win first place in their clan competition. News of this had spread far and wide, and the other 3 families had all heard about it as well. However, none of them had taken it to heart. After all, who would care about a measly heavenly body tier cultivator? Thus, he had been given a fright upon learning that Ling Han had already advanced to the Eternal River tier. However, before the small mountain of level 14 godly metal, how could he suppress his greed? To tell you the truth, so what if those godly metals are yours? It's your word against mine, so who would believe you? However, seeing that you've also made some contributions, here, this is your commission. Shi Gangyang tossed out a spatial ring. Pa! The spatial ring landed on the ground and started to spin around. Meanwhile, there was a look of disdain on Shi Gangyang's face. Apart from saints, the Treasure Forest Pavilion wasn't afraid of anyone else. Could Ling Han become a saint? The answer was clearly no. This was because he hadn't become the Star Sand Saint's disciple. Moreover, he had only ranked second among the new students during the initial recruitment. The honor of first rank had gone to Gu Dawi. However, after Gu Dawi's disappearance, the Star Sand Saint still hadn't taken Ling Han as his disciple. This was a clear sign that the great saint didn't believe in Ling Han's ability to become a saint. Even a great saint didn't believe in his abilities, so his fate was as good as sealed. Regardless of how powerful Ling Han became, he would still only be an Eternal River tier elite. However, how many Eternal River tier elites did the 4 clans of the Treasure Forest Pavilion have? A frightening number. The spatial ring finally fell to the ground after spinning for a few more revolutions. It lay there silently, just like that. There are 100,000 true origin stones inside. That's already quite a large sum. Shi Gangyang said with a sneer. Take it and p*s off. Otherwise, you won't even get a single true origin stone. Chapter 1527 You Dare to Screw with Me. 100,000 true origin stones. Eternal River tier elites could easily earn this amount if they opened their mouth. After all, Eternal River tier cultivators could be regarded as elites no matter where they went. However, what did this matter? They were worth nothing in Shi Gangyang's eyes. I'm openly screwing with you, but what can you do? Shi Gangyang crossed his arms before his chest, a smug look on his face. Ling Han had only just advanced to the Eternal River tier, and he was more so as foolish and naive as a child. He had actually given Lin Yuqi all of his godly metal in one go. If he didn't cheat him, whom else would he cheat? Why aren't you picking it up? Are you unhappy with the amount? Shi Gangyang continued to humiliate Ling Han, saying, I'm already being incredibly generous by giving you this amount. Otherwise, you might not even receive a single true origin stone. Hurry up, take it and p*s off. Ling Han chuckled and said, It's been a long time since I felt such a strong urge to beat someone. Congratulations. You fueled my urge to become violent again. Ha, you want to get physical? Shi Gangyang shook his head upon hearing this. Young people were truly too reckless. Weren't they aware of their own limitations? Fighting against him? That would simply be seeking humiliation. In any case, he could teach this brat a lesson in life. In fact, he was actually a little jealous of Ling Han. He had only reached the Eternal River tier after cultivating for tens of millions of years. Yet Ling Han? He was brimming with vitality, and he was much like a scathing furnace. It was clear that he was extremely young. Ling Han's lifespan would be hundreds of millions of years longer than his. Ling Han waved his fists and said, You're not worthy of becoming my opponent. I'm simply going to pummel you. You're but a measly cultivator at the low extreme area. Shi Gangyang was still expressing his disdain, yet Ling Han had already charged forward and struck out with his hand. Heavenly bodies appeared, and there was an expanse of dazzling light within his silver river. Although there were only 80 or so heavenly bodies, each of them was hundreds of times larger than ordinary heavenly bodies. Shi Gangyang instantly felt a formidable pressure bearing down upon him. A burst of wind swept over, causing waves of pain to ripple across his skin. This is a powerful enemy. I can't underestimate him. He roared loudly before also unleashing his silver river. There were at least 700 heavenly bodies within this silver river, and this signified that he had already reached the late stage of the medium extreme. He had an advantage of 4 stars over Ling Han. "You're seeking death," he roared. He immediately counterattacked, spreading his hand and grabbing at Ling Han's throat. He was going to defeat Ling Han in the most humiliating way possible. He was going to leave Ling Han with a painful and unforgettable memory. Boom! Ling Han's hand arrived and easily obliterated Shi Gongyang's attack. Right now, he could even challenge elites at the consummate level of the Eternal River tier. Thus, how could someone at the medium extreme of the Eternal River tier rival him? What? Shi Gongyang cried in astonishment. He almost wet himself in fright. He's only at the low extreme, so how can he be this powerful? Ling Han tightened his grip, his hand already wrapped around Shi Gongyang's neck. Shi Gongyang's body instantly became limp under the power of his origin power. He couldn't move even a single finger. He was genuinely transfixed with terror. All he could do was stare at Ling Han in shock and disbelief. In fact, his eyes were almost about to pop out of their sockets. "Open your mouth," Ling Han ordered coldly. Shi Gongyang shook his head with great difficulty. At the same time, he kept his mouth tightly shut. Ling Han mercilessly slapped him, causing him to open his mouth. He then immediately stuffed the true origin stone inside. This true origin stone was so large that it caused Shi Gongyang's mouth to distort. Meanwhile, Ling Han grabbed another true origin stone and forcefully stuffed it inside his mouth. Shi Gongyang couldn't help but tremble, and his eyes were almost about to pop out. This was far too painful. He was at the Eternal River tier, so he could easily obliterate even the toughest true origin stones if he attacked them with his full power. However, he didn't possess a powerful physique, and his origin power was more so being restricted at this moment. Failing to form a protective barrier, how could his physique rival the toughness of true origin stones? His throat was immediately wounded after being forced to swallow 2 true origin stones. Blood sprayed from his mouth, and he felt an overwhelming pain shoot through his body. However, Ling Han was merciless as he forced a 3rd true origin stone into his mouth. Even though his cultivation had been suppressed, an Eternal River tier elite was still an Eternal River tier elite. How could he be killed so easily? "You're taking things too far. The Shi clan. No, the entire Treasure Forest Pavilion won't forgive you." Shi Gongyang was still talking tough with his divine sense. "Ha! You're more stubborn than I imagined," Ling Han said with a chuckle. He grabbed another true origin stone and stuffed it into Shi Gongyang's mouth. "Weren't you acting all arrogant and haughty just then? Didn't you want to dismiss me with a mere 100,000 true origin stones? Heh, a cultivator can be killed but not humiliated. You wanted to use these 100,000 true origin stones to dismiss me? Well, now I'm returning them all. Let's see how much you can stomach." Shi Gongyang instantly went as white as a sheet. Would his stomach explode if he swallowed all of these true origin stones? Most likely not. Even though he didn't possess a powerful physique, the bodies of Eternal River tier elites were still incredibly powerful. Thus, it would be extremely difficult to force it to the point of explosion. However, true origin stones were also incredibly tough. These weren't things that his body could easily digest. Thus, his belly would clearly reflect how many true origin stones he had swallowed. The image of his other body parts remaining normal while his belly became as large as a small mountain flashed across Shi Gongyang's mind. He couldn't help but shudder at the thought of this. He truly couldn't comprehend what was happening right now. He was an entire minor level above Ling Han, and thus they should have at least been evenly matched, even if Ling Han was a 4-star genius. So, how had he been suppressed so easily? He shook his head as Ling Han forced another true origin stone into his mouth. His belly visibly grew larger again. Ling Han smiled faintly. However, in Shi Gongyang's eyes, he was nothing short of a devil. "Aren't you afraid of the Treasure Forest Pavilion taking revenge?" Shi Gongyang asked in anger. "Pah!" Ling Han ruthlessly slapped him again. "Have you become stupid after eating too many stones? Would I be doing this if I were afraid? Sure enough, as someone who dared to cheat me, there's something wrong with your brain." Shi Gongyang genuinely wanted to cry. How had he provoked such a ruthless person? Not only was he unfathomably powerful, but he was also a fearless person who didn't give a toss about his background. He wasn't giving face to even the treasure forest pavilion. "I'll return your belongings to you," he hurriedly shouted. He was afraid that Ling Han might eventually kill him. "There's no hurry," Ling Han said with a shake of his head. "In any case, you can't escape from me, so why don't we enjoy ourselves for a little longer?" "Enjoy your mom," Shi Gangyang roared in his mind. "I simply cursed you in my mind, yet you're already torturing me to such an extent. What would happen if I cursed you aloud?" However, he only dared to think this in his mind. He didn't dare to say it out aloud. "Are they tasty? You can have more if they're tasty. There's no hurry. After all, there's no one fighting over them with you." Ling Han forced True Origin Stone after True Origin Stone into his mouth. Heh! This was the price for daring to steal his belongings. Shi Gangyang felt like he was about to die. However, how could mere physical pain cause an eternal river tier elite to lose their consciousness? Tears started to stream down his face and he said, "I'll give you whatever you want. Just let me go." "Nonsense. Those godly metals were originally mine anyway. Stop pretending to be generous." Ling Han continued to stuff True Origin Stones into his mouth. Shi Gangyang had used these 100,000 True Origin Stones to humiliate him, so he would naturally return the favor using the exact same True Origin Stones. Shi Gangyang sobbed even louder. If he had known this earlier, he would have only given Ling Han one True Origin Stone. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.